of the Newland Rail undergrounding project. He was awarded the New Zealand Society of Local Government Managers' highest honour, the Distinguished Management Award in 2007 during his time at Waitakere City. At the time, only 7 people had been presented with the award. Harry was recognised in the same year at the Society's conference in Wellington for 40 years of outstanding service to the sector. In receiving the award, Harry predictably gave the credit for his achievements to the people he had worked with. I have always believed people who work for local government go to work to make a positive difference in people's lives, and that is a very worthwhile way to spend your own life, he said. Harry retired in March 2008 after 36 years with Waitakere City Council, 6 of them as Chief Executive Officer. In addition to his administrative duties, Harry was a senior national figure in the Civil Defence Organisation and involved with sea rescue and a number of statutory and other bodies. He was a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for outstanding contribution to New Zealand various areas, including judo. He was a life member and honorary past president of New Zealand Judo and was also president of the Commonwealth Judo Association. During his years with these organisations, Harry received many medals and diplomas for his service, and he was always also very active on the mat. He was a black belt, 6th Dan, and literally coached hundreds and hundreds of young enthusiasts. It was through Harry's efforts that judo was included for the first time as one of the 10 official sports at the 1990 Commonwealth Games. In 2003, he was presented with the prestigious International Judo Federation Silver Medal for merit for services to national and international judo in Osaka, Japan at the World Championships. He'll be sadly missed by his family, friends and the many judo and local government colleagues. Tahuna Minhinnick. We're very sorry to hear the passing of Tahuna, a man who was most definitely one of life's colourful characters. A skilled treaty negotiator, he was a force to be reckoned with and had a wide range of skills and talents. He is attributed with starting the first marae-based health centre scheme and was a stalwart for Ngāti Ata in terms of promoting the iwi's aspirations and objectives. In the death notice, his people said Tahuna gifted them with powers of thought, determination and the strength of mind to protect the iwi of Ngāti Ata with pride. A high-profile property developer, he joined Housing Minister Nick Smith and myself when we jointly announced the developments at Drury and Glenbrook. The developments at the southwestern coast brought the total number of special housing areas in Auckland 86 with a combined yield of 45,000 new homes. At the media conference, Tahuna said the Glenbrook SHA was strategically positioned just minutes away from the Glenbrook steel mill, which employed 2,000 workers and needed to attract people to his area. He was instrumental in championing the SHA because it supported his iwi and its commercial aspirations. A very proud son of Dame Naniko Minhinnick, he was a part of the negotiation team of Ngā Mana Whenua o Tamaki Makaurau and was involved with achieving a smooth and effortless transition of the management of Tamaki Makaurau's maunga from council to the Maunga Authority. An environmentalist like his mother, Tahuna cared deeply for his surroundings and was part of the group that worked successfully to improve the water quality of the Manukau Harbour. A gym owner who promoted healthy lifestyles, he produced marae aerobics, children's aerobics television program from 1997 to 2004 and acted as a supplementary golfer in the 2002 movie The Price of Milk. Survived by his wife Lisa and their children Atia, Naiwi and Brian, his son Te Ahu Raumati and Mokopuna Mati Rowan, JD and Christy. Tahuna will be sadly missed but remembered for his contribution to many lives and Tamaki Makaurau. Finally, to Martin. As I said on my Facebook page when he passed, he had a great innings, but like Tahuna, he died too young. Born in the West in Henderson, Martin came from a family of cricketers and had an actor, Russell Crowe, as a cousin. He joined the Cornwall Cricket Club at the young age and maintained a lifelong connection with that club. At Auckland Grammar School, he was deputy head boy and in his final year and captained the school's cricket team. First class debut was in January 1980, playing for Auckland against Canterbury. He was only 17. He scored 51 runs in his first innings, his team's highest score. Named New Zealand's Young Cricketer of the Year, Martin was given the chance to spend 6 months on the ground staff of Lords, which he took up and at the same time played for the Marleybone Cricket Club. His maiden first-class century was scored in 1981-82 New Zealand domestic season. Then he switched to Central Districts, a career limited by his international duties. His highest score for the team and in all New Zealand domestic cricket was 242 against Otago in January 1990, after which he was appointed captain of New Zealand for a tour of Pakistan later that year. After that, it was with the Sri Lankan tour that he set a new record for the highest score by a New Zealander at the crease of 523 balls and more than 10 hours, scoring 29 fours and 3 sixes. At the 1992 World Cup, Martin finished as the tournament's leading run scorer. His last series as captain of New Zealand came when Australia toured in 1993. He had struggled with injury but returned as captain for one final match in November that year, the first game of a series against Australia. In total, Martin captained New Zealand in 16 tests and was lauded for his style and grace. At the time of his retirement, only Sir Richard Hadley had played more tests for New Zealand. In 1992, he was made a member of the Order of British Empire for services to cricket and was inducted into the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame in February last year. Sadly, he was diagnosed with lymphoma at the end of 2012, and while in June 2013 he was diagnosed as cancer-free, he decided to cut his ties with cricket. Unfortunately, the lymphoma returned in 2014. He fulfilled his wish to see the 2015 Cricket World Cup and died on March 3rd, 2016. As the Guardian said by way of eulogy, he was not just one of New Zealand's greatest ever cricketers, but one of the most elegant batsmen the world had yet seen. Cricket New Zealand and the world will certainly miss Martin Crowe and his illustrious performances. Councillors and all, can we please stand in recognition of those four great Aucklanders? Thank you all.
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe this is an oversight on your part or on the part of the officials, but he may be acknowledged next month, but you will be aware, I'm sure, that Alex Smith passed away.
Yep. I'll make sure he's acknowledged next month.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, great man, Alex. Okay, now, Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, your office probably only just received this very late yesterday, but I think it's worthy of having it acknowledged in this document here. Our investment in Lightpath has proven huge dividends, 100,000 cyclists. We don't know the walker numbers because they're not counted, but the cycle numbers reached 100,000 on Lightpath since it was opened in mid-December. So if your staff or the Secretary could maybe add that to the achievements list.
Yeah, I understand you have something too, Councillor Webster?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to recognise last night was the inaugural Balance Farm Environment Awards that Auckland is now a sponsor for. It was won by Richard and Diane Kidd, who run a sheep and beef farm in Helensville. The judges actually said of the couple who won the Lamb New Zealand Livestock Awards and the Farm Stewardship Award in partnership with the Kiwi Tree Trust and New Zealand Farm Environment Trust. They said the kids are environmental champions and won great role models for dry stock farming, achieving impressive stock and financial performance while working hand in hand with the environment. This was an award that we have been trying to get off the table. The staff were very sceptical about it and actually said to me last night they actually hadn't realised that people could talk about farming and protecting the environment and waterways in the same breath. So that was a bit of a worry that staff thought that, but it was a very good evening, and thank you to Councillor Cashmore for helping me get that on board. Thank you.
Very, very good. And councillors, just in terms of the achievement, I recognised last week that we had received special mention in the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2016. That's noted there, and we will formally receive that award with an opportunity to present to global leaders in July at the World City Summit in Singapore. Councillors, I want to thank you for joining with me in reflections on acknowledgement and achievement. Move next to petitions. I don't have any petitions. Public input. We have 2 matters of public input. We have 2 speakers, Penny Bright and Lisa Prager. Penny, would you like to come up here first, please? You're going to speak to us on membership of the Property Council and on matters relating to the CRL and the ATAP.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is quite a historic meeting in my view. As an anti-corruption public watchdog, I believe this is the first time the governing body has addressed what I believe is a significant conflict of interest. Auckland Council and CCOs are members of the New Zealand Property Council, which was quite new information to me. And what I'd like to remind you of is item 2 of your standard agenda's declaration of interest. Members are reminded of the need to be vigilant, to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as a member and any private or other external interest they might have. Well, that's talking about you individually, but what about collectively? How on earth can it be seen in any way, shape or form to be proper for Auckland Council and some CCOs to be members of a private sector lobby group whose job it is to look after the interest, particularly of commercial property developers? I note that Auckland Council and CCOs are not members of the Kohimarama Residents and Ratepayers Association or any of the other Residents and Ratepayers Associations, and neither should they be. And I take Councillor Lee's point that what we have here is the council has a regulatory function like being a referee in a game. You do not expect the referee to pick up the ball and play on the side of one of the teams, because that, in my view, is exactly what is happening here. And it's not okay, it's not right, and it needs to cease forthwith. Now, I have an extensive Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act request in on this matter, and I'm particularly interested with how much is Auckland Council and our Auckland Council CCOs paying to be members of the Property Council, which then, on behalf of a lot of citizens and ratepayers, then lobbies against the interests of citizens and ratepayers. How much money? And how can that possibly be top secret or commercially confidential when it's public money? How is that right? Well, I was notified that an extension of time would be needed to reply to this particular legoima. 4th of April, I should have a response. Well, that's great, because on the 7th of April, I'll be down in Parliament presenting in person for 30 minutes before the lawmakers, the Local Government and Environment Select Committee. And this will be yet another piece of evidence that I can present showing how desperately we need an urgent inquiry into Auckland Council-controlled organisations. And my petition said, requesting that the House conduct an urgent inquiry into the cost effectiveness, transparency and democratic accountability to Auckland Council and the majority of Auckland citizens and ratepayers of all Auckland Council-controlled organisations. How is it that nobody's ever sharpened their pencils and got their rulers out and checked the facts against the mantra? We have had first LATEs, local authority trading enterprises, then changed the alphabet soup, council-controlled organisations. Isn't it time to check the facts against the mantra? Because in my considered opinion, running councils, local authorities in a more business-like way has only really benefited those businesses that have got the contracts. And who are they? Well, actually, we don't know, because that devilish detail we don't yet still have in its entirety, and that also is wrong. How can you have transparency or accountability without proper written records which are available for public scrutiny when it is public money? Where's the money being spent? From whom are we borrowing it? Where is it being invested? And when I'm sitting in that chair, Your Honour, things will change. And we will know exactly where the money's going, because the books will be open. The other thing that I want to raise was coming from that council-controlled organisational meeting, there's a new phrase which is very popular, and it's called value for money. Great, but how can you measure value for money if you do not know exactly where the money's going? How can you do that? And in my view, what would transform transparency, not just in this council, but around New Zealand, at central and local government and in the judiciary, is the full and thorough implementation of the Public Records Act 2005, which says full and accurate records must be created and maintained.
Penny, can you wind up now?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm concerned about is accurate evidence-based decision-making based on the facts, and that value for money must include looking at bringing council services and regulatory functions back in-house, because we swapped under this super city for the 1%, 7 democratically elected councils, warts and all, for 7 undemocratically selected council-controlled organisations, each with their own board, their own officers, their own statement of intent, blah, blah, blah. We replaced one with the other, and we, the public, never had a say, and it's not okay.
Thank you, Penny. Right, are there questions, councillors? Councillor Cathy.
The amount council spends being a member of the property council isn't a secret, so I wonder if the chief executive could actually tell us how much a corporate membership for this council costs. You must have known the question was coming up
We can
today.
do it under the item.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Right, any other questions?
Great.
Right, thank you, Penny. Lisa, your turn.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. It was a pretty active meeting last time, and I'd like you to imagine all those people still in the room with us. Unfortunately, they all have jobs and are stuck in traffic and can't be here with us today. I'd simply like to take up the recommendation that Councillor Mike Lee has put, that the governing body, in recognition of the Council's statutory planning role in the unitary plan process, and in order to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, disown their position with the Property Council. I believe that the Council has lost its moral compass in all ways. This organisation has turned into a corporate entity and failed to remember its role as a representative of the public. You are in control of our entire public assets, and yet you had handed it over to a corporate structure. The membership of the Property Council only highlights this reality and is one of many memberships that reflects the fact that the elected members have lost control to the executive within this organisation. I just quickly popped up the Property Council's website, and it said if you become a member, this is something that you get. Access to government officials and ministers, a collective force of the industry behind us, knowledge and information to be kept in the loop with regard to regulations. The role of the Council is as a statutory regulatory body. You should be above reproach, and it is your job to, as Penny said, be the referee. That is why I believe the unitary plan process, and I remember saying this at the very first meeting in Manukau City when the unitary plan was rolled out, is a complete and utter, what do I say, act of entire corruption from beginning to end. We have a very, very good operative district plan with all of the controls within it in order to bring about the growth that's necessary. And I can see Penny looking very stressed because guess what? This is her baby, and she has
Mr. Mayor,
vested
can we
interests.
hang on,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Hey, hang on. Yeah, look,
I
I
think
know.
it's
Right,
time
so-
that we actually
yep.
just called a little bit of time on accusations of corruption. We're happy to listen to anything intellectual, useful or enlightening. That simply isn't.
Yeah.
Your Worship, is it not
Keep
corrupt?
focused.
Is it not corrupt for this organisation to be a member of an industrial
Look,
organisation?
you have been running the same line for 5 years, Lisa. Just keep to the point. You're
Okay,
here
the
to
reason
talk
I'm running the
about
same line is
the move.
I am consistent in what I am saying.
Yeah,
and
and
the
we don't-
public
yeah.
are aware, brutally aware of the fact that you are not representing our collective interests by failing to be open, transparent and accountable about what you are actually up to. And I say you, I say the executive members who are pulling all the strings. Now this will change, but I will say that the fact that you are a member of the Property Council throughout this unitary plan process proves that you are not acting as the statutory regulatory body above reproach whose interest is in controlling the development. You are on board with the development. And I just want to bring a little bit of personal experience. Over the Easter, I went to visit my in-laws in up past Warkworth. And from the minute I left or went over the harbour bridge, I began to see nothing but a creeping mould of development. Now, I thought the point of the unitary plan and of intensification was that we didn't have creeping, crawling, urban sprawl. And what I find, but I'm sorry, it's too late. I mean, you had the power to stop that. But it's not stopped now. In other words, you're getting a buck both ways, and we all know it, which is you're getting sprawl and you're getting intensification and you've got out of control congestion, none of which is going to change. But the bottom line here is I just want to stick to the simple point is the regulatory body of this elected council has absolutely no place in being a paid-up member of the Committee for Auckland, of the Property Council, and of any other lobby group. And I'm sure it doesn't take a rock star within your organisation to figure out who is a lobby group and who is not. And when everybody finds out, eventually, like they do, and the shit hits the fan, then you better find a really good way to explain your position to the electorate, or you won't be sitting in these chairs. Now, I'll still be sitting there in the public chairs, but you won't, because they are not dumb, and they proved that at the last meeting. They want a council that represents the... Penny, can you please be quiet?
I'm sorry,
Well, I'm trying to concentrate, and all I'm getting is a
So
mishmash.
just finish, because we're over the 5
Respect
now,
goes
please.
both ways, Mr. Mayor.
Lisa, can you just finish, please?
What does that mean, Penny?
Can you just finish,
What,
please?
you don't think I respect you as the
Right.
Deputy Mayor of Auckland?
Thank you very
That I don't
much.
respect your support of all the things going on in the unitary plan. Look,
Right,
Penny,
are
we
there
all
any
know that
questions?
you're the pusher and mover
Are there
behind
any
it.
questions?
And if this council had any sense, they'd call it a heel.
Are there any questions?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Can't talk about the
Are there any questions?
that
Well,
should be an
actually, I
apology.
can. It's called freedom of speech.
Councillor L.
Just through you, Your Worship, I just want to put a clarification here. Is that okay?
No, this is just questions.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that I'm led the unitary plan through
no,
to the
that's good.
process now.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
you've
you.
been the front of it, Alf. We all know that.
Any other questions, please?
That's all I wanted to make clear.
Right,
Yeah,
thank
that
you
you're
very
the
much,
front.
Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, councillors, I'm going to move that we receive those 2 pieces of public input. I'll
I'd
move
like
that.
to speak to that, Mr Mayor.
Sec-
I'd like to speak to
Yeah,
that.
I'll move it.
This is just to receive
No,
them.
I think that,
You
I
don't,
think,
you can vote against it.
no, I want to
Councillor
speak to
Jordan.
it because
No,
I
we-
think that is an abomination what you just said.
Thank you.
Well, it just happens to be the truth, Alf.
Yeah, order, please. Right, so I've moved that, it's been seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's against?
No.
Right, that. Thank you. Right, move on now to local board input. There's no local board input. Order, please. There's no, order, please.
That's not
Order,
acceptable.
order, please.
That's not acceptable.
Extraordinary, we'll move on.
Get your mate,
Extraordinary business. Extraordinary business, we have no extraordinary business. We have a notice of motion. That notice of motion will be considered as the last item before we go into confidential. So I want to acknowledge that. Right. Now, we move on to item 11. Right. Where are our team from Auckland Transport? Chris, would you like to come up here, please? Chris, we were, is Claire and Peter here with you?
There are apologies.
There are apologies, right? Okay. Right, councillors, item 11, City Rail Link and Auckland Transport Alignment Project update. So this is an opportunity. Obviously, there's been a considerable amount of progress made in the City Rail Link and also ongoing progress being made in the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. I want to acknowledge Councillor Bill Cashmore for his work and beside me on that project. But this is an opportunity in particular to get a sense of acknowledgement of how we're proceeding with regard to the number 1 project under the Auckland Plan, the City Rail Link, and the fact that we are now starting to move in towards final negotiations relating to the deal that the government has agreed to move forward on. So we've got Chris Meal here, who is the CRL Project Director, and it's great to see you, Chris. Thank you very much for coming in. I want to acknowledge you and all your team on behalf of our council, and quite frankly, the people of Auckland. This is a very, very significant project. It's now very close to formally starting, and so it would be helpful and useful for you to give us a little bit more information in terms of the update that's before us. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Worship. Councillors, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure quite how much time you've got, but there's a lot happening down at the project office in the AMP building. You'll see around the streets the evidence of the early works construction that's commenced, and that started just before Christmas last year with a blessing at Victoria Street. And so there is Hawkins and McConnell Dow, the Connectus contractor who's working on that package of work, has commenced that, and they're just at this stage just dealing with clearing away of utilities in preparation for the pipe jack, which is a creation of a new stormwater down the eastern side of Albert Street. So that work's underway, and we're just finalising the negotiations with them for the main work, which will be the construction of the tunnels. And so that'll commence in June with the construction of the tunnels from Custom Street up to Wyndham Street, and Downers on the other side of the Queen Street and under the Britomart. They'll be commencing slightly after that with the Britomart package of the work. And Fletcher's have commenced their preparation just this week with the closing of the underpass under Queen Street. So you'll see construction hoardings all around there now. So there's quite a lot of work happening already in preparation for that main work. On the other side, and I guess more to the content of the paper here, is the discussions going on with your office, the Mayor, with Stephen and David Warburton at an executive level, and various of our team talking with officials in government about their emerging views of how they will participate in the governance of the project. And there's discussion still going on there, and I guess that'll be evolving in parallel with our other preparations over the next few weeks and perhaps months. The other big piece of work that's going on, we've just concluded excuse me, our industry engagement with contracting industry from around the world to share our views of how we would logically package the rest of the work. And that's the main works as we describe it, and that's obviously the piece that's subject to the joint funding of council and government. So we've just concluding that packaging work now, so we'll be announcing the way in which we're going to package the remaining work. Following our board next month, we'll be launching that on a public front to the market at large. So the team there very busy, and will continue to be so.
Can you give us a little bit more info around sort of thinking in terms of how that might look?
The packaging?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very, very significant project, and we've been looking at a range of options as to how we might be able to conclude this project. So give us a little bit more direction as to what the types of options are that might be available to us.
Well, just in terms of the work itself, there's a key differentiator in a project like this as opposed to a road tunnelling project, which many of us are familiar with, and that's the major impact that the rail systems has on the function of the rail beat. It's one thing to build a tunnel, but you have to fit it out with a whole lot of complex and interactive systems, and so we're looking at getting that as a separate package and getting that on board early, so that as the contractor who will ultimately deliver that, they will de-risk a lot of their activities in relation to what remains, which is a big piece of civil underground tunnelling and station building structure. The industry is specialised in various forms, and which is why we talk to a cross-section of those. So we see two big packages working in that frame. We've got another big piece, which is when we connect the east and west facing connections at Mount Eden. That's all has to be done in a live corridor space. So we'll be looking to separate that as a package of an alliance style, working closely with Kiwi Rail because they own and control the network. We have to maintain a passenger service through that at the same time. And so we've been doing a lot of detailed staging as to how that might be brought about, and I think you saw that in your walkthrough recently. And then the other key package is the work which we will do at Britomart Station itself, where we have to build extra egress to the east, and also we're modifying the platforms. They have to be built wider than they are at the moment because there just won't be enough. They're not big enough now to deal with the future load and throughput. That piece of work will happen after we've actually got the trains running through, because there's no way we can build it while the station remains in its present form. So effectively we'll end up with 4 big packages of work, and we're working through a whole procurement tender documentation strategy to fit with that.
Right, and just a couple of issues that I want to clarify. Firstly, the issue of the office. I'd like to ask you to invite the councillors and the local board chairs at least to actually come for a visit through the office. It's a pretty amazing site. Prime Minister and Minister of Transport went through recently. Hugely impressive. Something like 160 odd people are in there at the moment. Very, very innovative in that space with a lot of energy. So I encourage you to take the opportunity when it comes, councillors, to actually go down and have a visit with Chris and his team. Chris, the second issue is obviously it's a major project. We've seen that operating up in and the impact of it around Queen Street and Albert Street and the enclosed environs. Assessment is 124 new projects either starting now or in the very near future within sort of 300 or 400 metres either side of the city rail link, either public or private projects, something like $6 billion over the next 4 years, so it's massive. Now what that means, of course, is considerable inconvenience. So can you talk to us a little bit about messaging? So we see that on the bus backs and all that sort of stuff already, the builders on. Messaging in terms of the impact on the community, and very clear messaging around what exactly is happening there that's causing the impact.
Yes, we're working closely with the council team. The City Integration Group is now reformed up in Albert Street there, so we're working with that team across the board, looking at all of the projects that are going on. The messaging about encouraging people to avoid the city in a motor car if they possibly can, that will continue. I've just left our Auckland Transport Executive meeting there. We've actually set up in the ATOC, the Traffic Control Group, there's people who are doing nothing else but watching the streams and the monitoring and looking at whatever massaging can be done around the traffic control, just to ease that on a daily and a moment by moment basis. but we'll also have a continual review of the traffic flow itself, and we're not finished yet analysing the cumulative effects of those projects. If you recall, at the time the project was designated and the consent lodged and the notice of requirements were processed, we have an obligation under that to monitor the traffic flows and not have those deteriorate by more than a measure of something like a 30%. But of course what's happened in the intervening period is the world has discovered Albert Street, and so you can see the amount of development going on, so we're actually having to have a real-time look at the cumulative effects of that. So that'll be an ongoing process. It's not right yet, but neither have we started the full effects yet, so we've got a team looking at that to make the best out of what will, no one can deny the fact it'll be a congested space for a number of years, and really leading cities have to cope with that and deal with that.
Yep, it's part of the reality of retrofitting a city. Okay, right, councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Christine, or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was very happy to move or second these recommendations.
Yep.
And in doing so, wanted to just pause for a moment and acknowledge the historic significance of this. This has been a very long overdue relationship with central government, and it would not have been possible without Auckland Transport. I know we've heard a bit of discussion about the merits or the demerits of CCOs, but frankly, this could not have happened, and I want to acknowledge the staff. I think Chris, perhaps it isn't fully understood, but this is not just huge on a New Zealand scale, this is huge internationally as a project. And the experience that Chris, as the project manager, brings to this, and the way in which it has been able to really get some, I think, genuine attention, the level of the modelling, the financial data, it has, I think, had a level of professionalism that local government have not seen before. So in acknowledging our own CEO and the CEO of Auckland Transport and all of the teams that they have worked with that, I am well pleased with the wonderful representation of the issues that have been brought by yourself and Councillor Cashmore, and I think in authorising you to negotiate a joint business plan today, it really does recognise major progress for Auckland. So maybe, Chris, my question to you could be, you could talk a little bit about the team and the experience that they bring to this, and the way in which you are ensuring that this is, we often talk about intergeneration, but this is inter-electoral term-ish insofar as making sure that we can have a seamless transition in moving this project forward because of its significance. So Chris, could you talk about some of the experience that you have with you on your team on this?
Yes, it's interesting, as you say, these things come about, if you're lucky, once in a generation or once in 100 years in our case, but there are a strange group of people, and I'd have to count myself as one of them, who really like doing this stuff, and they, not quite gypsies, but the team has involved experience from people who've worked around the world, and we've got a large team of, we call them our technical advisors. That's our engineering and architectural team, and they come from international consultancies. We've got Jasmax, who are, you know, local architect of repute and who did a great job on Britomart. They've partnered with Grimshaw, who's an international transport architect. They do work around the world. We've got Oricon and Mott McDonald, all of whom are international firms, specialists in their field. So they constitute our technical advisor group. But in my management team, I've got people who've grown up in Crossrail, and they've done these projects around the world. In our planning team, we've done a lot of pioneering work through Deb Godinet's team in the consenting and designation. Our rail safety and systems people, I've hired people from the Middle East who are working on these projects as well. So there's an international mix of people who, for some weird and wonderful reason, love doing this stuff, and they've all handpicked. Not enough, thank you, but the motivation is there and we formed that team for this project. And some will carry on and help run it, the operations people. We've got a shadow operator team there. Some of those will continue past the life of the project. Those like me who are in there building it won't, but the team has been handpicked and resourced from around the world for the purpose of this project.
Are there other, through you, Mr. Chairman, are there other future-proofing dimensions to this, such as potential for rail to the North Shore for the future? Could you talk about, perhaps, and give confidence to the councillors that
Yes.
there really has been a comprehensive overview in terms of allowing for the next generation of politicians and decision makers to come through to have the options for the future?
Yeah, sure. So as far as the project's concerned, the concept of a heavy rail link to the North Shore, if that was to happen, at the southern end of the Aotea station, intersection of Wellesley and outside, Victoria, no, Aotea Street, sorry, Wellesley Street and Albert Street, that intersection there, which is the Glengarry site, which will be the main entrance to the building. We've got an alignment preserved below the City Rail Link alignment, which carries on down Wellesley Street and out through and descend across the North Shore. So we've future-proofed that alignment as an interchange point. And that alignment, if it happened, would carry on to the east under Albert Park and join to the network. There are a lot of complications in that, and I guess that'll be something for the future generation, as you put it. But we haven't precluded that, and we've actually provided that as an interchange if that were ever to happen.
Finally, my question is to you. As part of the Britomart design, one of the criteria was the aesthetic, to actually introduce beauty into public space. What commitment and guarantee can you give us that we are carrying that tradition of ensuring that these spaces are as publicly attractive and safe as can be made available for Aucklanders again for the future?
Certainly. Part of the team, or a number of the team, are looking at the whole urban realm, the development certainly out in Lower Queen Street. The planning there is that would be a pedestrianised space. We're still wrestling through the detail of whether there needs to be a bus slip lane in the Tyler Galway exits to the main east-west corridors there. But where we're working with both precinct properties, who are obviously doing the development in the shopping centre there, and with the Britomart Trust there. So we're working through master planning a public square there at the moment. So that is certainly be a lovely space.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move or second these recommendations.
Very good.
Thanks.
Right, now I've got a little bit of a batting lineup. So I've got Councillor Linda, then Councillor Mike, then Councillor George, then Councillor Chris, then Councillor Bill. Right, okay. Right, we'll make sure we get everybody in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased that the government's brought forward its commitment to doing this work a year early. That's what we need in Auckland, and I mean in particular out west it's going to shave at least 15 minutes off a journey from Henderson, which actually makes it more attractive for people. As long as we provide free Wi-Fi on there, they'll be able to work as well. So one of the things I note, you know, as we know, the Northwest is going to take 22% of the population growth in the next 15 years or so. And to me, after taking, you know, an average speed of 5.5 kilometres an hour, 40 minutes to get here yesterday, and I live 20 kilometres away, and 38 minutes of that was actually trying to get on the motorway. And I think that's where I don't really see in this a real commitment to large transport investment in terms of a Northwestern Busway in here. We've got it in our 10-year plan. We brought it back from, yes, we did bring it back from the second decade, but I don't think we actually allowed for the type of growth that we were seeing. It wasn't actually being looked at. And I think when you look at that being part of the Western Ring Route, it is actually accessed by people from the North Shore as well. And what we're finding is huge amounts of congestion no alternative transport modes at all. There's no train for the northwest, there's no rapid transport network with the bus, and people are getting more and more frustrated. So I hope that the board, and I hope that our elected representatives on that board are really going to take this back. It's hugely important, and we look at the fact that 80% of the growth in New Zealand is going to be in Auckland. The government and this council needs to put serious money into the growth areas for our roading and transport infrastructure.
Perhaps if I can just quickly reflect back. So, Councillor Linda, we are moving into the sort of the final stage of modelling the various scenarios in terms of what we'd invest in and when. I think it's fair to say, and you must have picked it up, the government certainly have a sense that the Northwestern busway is at the top of the list and not at the middle or the bottom. So I think you'll find that coming through in the final, at the back end of the discussions. But as I say, we've got another 3 months yet to go, and as we've been doing, we'll continue to keep you well appraised as to how those discussions go.
Just a question, if I might, because we are talking about large projects.
Yep.
At the moment, the next phase of the widening of the Northwestern Motorway is beginning, which is from Henderson to Royal Road. It would seem very smart to work with NZTA and start to do that preliminary work for a busway now, rather than doing this and then going back again. Is that on the cards at all? Just doing an essential widening and a bit of a bus lane, a bit of a painted road?
Yes, through Pete Clark's team, and apologies for his absence today. He's got a team looking right across the board at the transport needs for Auckland as a consequence of this growth that you're talking about. So he's actually got a team looking in some detail to that. I'm aware that that's happening. I'm not across the details of that, other than he's got a very good team looking at accommodating this growth that we're looking for over the next years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because it would be prudent to, earmark land before houses are built on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Mike.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chris. And I'd like to endorse the comments of Councillor Fletcher and acknowledge the critical role of Auckland Transport in bringing this project thus far. But I want to go further than that. I want to note that this project did not begin with the advent of the Super City. It was certainly, the groundwork certainly was from the legacy councils, from the Auckland Regional Council, from the Auckland Regional Transport Authority, and from Kiwi Rail, who did the business case and handed it over in a virtually finished form to Auckland Transport in November 2010. And I recall, Mr. Mayor, a meeting I had with you in March 2010 when we served in somewhat different roles. But I want to say this. Willie Jackson has put it about that I am an outspoken Len Brown supporter, which may surprise some members in here, but I want to say this. History will acknowledge the role of you, Mr. Brown, as the person who took this project forward, who, against the tide of the government and the Ministry of Transport, brought it thus far. And so, credit where credit is due. That'll be your acknowledgement in history. However, we had a briefing from Auckland Transport a couple of days ago, and it was about light rail, and the wonderful officers who did a lot of planning work for the City Rail Link are now focused on light rail. They referred to the City Rail Link in the past tense. It's not. It's still ahead of us. There will still be major challenges, and we have to ensure that we complete this within budget and on time, and that won't be easy. There is a consensus, a political consensus that was hard won around this table, but one of the main arguments was that there will not be a cost blowout. And so it will be the role of the council in the future, as the shareholder of Auckland Transport, to ensure there is not a cost blowout. That remains a possibility. However, we have come so far. This project will be huge, as big as anything that Melbourne or Sydney has seen, or in its own way proportionately London. A huge project for Auckland. It will bring enormous benefits, not just for the CBD, and I hate to use that word, but its impact on the CBD, Central City, will be transformational. No argument about that, but it will also benefit the rest of the region, which is linked by the rail network. That part of the west that is served by the rail network in particular, and I don't contradict what Councillor Cooper says about that other part of the west, which is not. However, it will be transformational for the whole of the Auckland region, and I think this is really an historic project that will be remembered in decades to come. So happy to support the recommendations.
Right, moved Councillor Fletcher and seconded Councillor Lee. Right, Councillor Chris D.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Chris, you're right about the world discovering Albert Street, and we've seen some fly-throughs, quite lovely fly-throughs of the future Albert Street. And I'm just a little bit concerned. I heard talk that possibly the CRL budget does no longer extend to upgrading Albert Street to what was shown to us. Considering that we're ripping it apart and there's probably over $1 billion of private investment on Albert Street signalled. Am I wrong in hearing that Albert Street is not going to be upgraded out of the CRL budget to the standard that was shown to us?
I'm not sure the presentation you're talking about, but we've been working for a while now at the reinstatement of the road of Albert Street. There's a lot of replanning happening there to deal with the bus traffic. So we're looking at getting a good bus flow down there, because it will be a.
Chris, can you speak into the mic?
It'll be a quite a busy bus corridor on that road, so that work's going on there now. There is a. If you look at the reinstatement of what is being excavated, by the time we've actually opened up Albert Street, we'll be putting that back, and we're working through those plans at the moment. I talked earlier about the redevelopment of Lower Queen Street across there, so in our budget we're planning for that work. But certainly there are aspirations beyond the mere reinstatement of the seal over the tunnel. That is a bit of a budgetary challenge for us at the moment, so we're working that through to make sure that we get a really good outcome for what will be a very busy street. It'll have a large public transport corridor in it, so we're still working those issues through.
So possibly, Chris?
So my expectation is not a reinstatement. I would not like to see what is there reinstated. That's not what was conveyed to us. So if the budget has been pared back, I think we need to know where it's been pared back, because this has just come to me through other channels in the last week, and I'm not sure whether other councillors know that Albert Street won't be the beautiful boulevard that was pictured to us. So this is pretty fundamental. So where in the CRL budget, what's changed? We know that there's a station that's changed and it's gone, and that was signalled to us some time ago, and there were significant savings in doing that. But I think we need to understand, as you move forward on this with Councillor Cashmore, what is that package and what's not in that package anymore?
Councillor Chris, I think the better idea, Chris can only give so much here, obviously, but the better idea would be for us to get a further update and specifically start to focus on post-tunnel work and reformation or regeneration of that area and how that might look, and on the basis that work will be done to a high standard, costings where they fall and in what cost centre they sit. All right, so I think there's a bit more
As
work yet
part
to
of
be
the
done.
CRL
Yeah.
project, not something that happens in 8 years,
Yeah.
10 years.
Oh, no.
Well, you won't be able to do that. I mean, basically, once you've cut and covered, you've got to return it to its appropriate state. Now we need to decide what that looks like and how those costs are looking at this point.
So we're working through those plans now and recognising there is probably up to 3 years' work in this, even in these enabling works contracts we're just about to commence. So there's a lot of time in order to go under the bridge before we actually reinstate the street, and certainly it's the concepts that we're working up there now certainly have an attractive feel to them.
Good. Okay. Good question, and we'll get more back on that. Councillor George.
Yeah, thank you. I've just got a few questions. On page 57 of the agenda, there's the completion date of major interventions of the APTN. And there's a couple there that I'm just a bit curious about. Well, first of all, is the Northwestern Busway. It's 2025 to 2035. I just wonder if that is correct, because it was, the Mayor said it was going up to the top of the priority list. Well, I don't think that's anywhere near the top of the priority list at 2025 to 2035. But the other one, which is really curious to me, is the additional Waitemata Harbour crossing, which is 2035 to 2045. Now, you know, the government's indicated that it's going to be between 2025 and 2030 that it'll be needed. So I do think that has to be really updated, because this document as it stands isn't accurate. And I'm not going to support a document which isn't accurate, because if you sign up to this, you'll be signing away the fact that these projects are going to be done in specific timeframes. So, you know, well, what are we going to do about that? Because I'm not going to support this today. If that's
Can you? Okay. Steve Wade.
Through you, Chair, at the moment, though, that is accurate. So this foundation report is a current state description of the 3-decade plan, and it's about completion date. Okay, so don't read additional Waitemata Harbour crossing as necessarily not starting until 2035. It's about the completion date.
Well, that's not correct as the completion date either, because we're told it's going to be needed at the outside 2030.
And so what we're doing in ATAP is testing these out.
Wow.
And what the Mayor's indicating is that the Northwestern Busway is a large investment that has been evaluated to be brought forward as one of the different investment interventions that ATAP might recommend. So all of what this is describing for you is the current state. It's not what ATAP is necessarily going to recommend to the ministers and the governing body on completion.
Okay, well, let's hope that is correct, because Auckland has kind of given assurances in the past, and you know, what we expected were going to happen, and it was the government that actually has said 2025 to 2030 you'll need a new additional Waitemata Harbour crossing, and reading this document, that's not what we're getting. But anyway, can I just ask, I'm curious to know whether the preliminary work that you're doing, or I don't know what it's called, it's preliminary work between Britomart and Wyndham Street, is that going to be put into the whole CRL project? It's about $270 million, I understand. Will that be part of the CRL project, which the government will come on board with and will reimburse us once it's been completed?
That's certainly the intention. The work that's going on there now is really just the construction of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And if you recall, when that was put before council as an initiative, it was in a climate of uncertainty as to when, if ever, the government was going to come on board. The 2020 was still hanging out there. Yeah. And short of putting the city on hold until that time, I think the council supported that as a piece of early work to get it underway. We won't be running trains through that. It'll only be when the rest of the project is finished that we'll be, as part of that second lot of construction, that we'll actually be fitting out the tunnel. Okay. There. So, and the idea was to get out of the downtown area, which, as you know, is a very congested spot, if there was any sense that the government approval of the project was going to be delayed. And I think it's actually been very effective as a move to get the project advanced.
That could really change our long-term plan, because I think in the long-term plan we haven't indicated that that's the case. So if that is the case, the government's going to come on board. I think the sooner we can get that in there and update the long-term plan showing that the government will contribute that their 75% of the 271 million. That'd be really helpful if they do put in 75%, like Winston Peters was saying.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice.
So anyway, that'll be good, and I'll watch this space.
So those discussions are just warming up.
I hope they are warm. They warm up in our favour, because the government's been let off the hook considerably if we don't get recompense from the government for that work that's happening now. The other thing is the EMUs, the additional EMUs. Now, is it 30 EMUs have been cut out of the budget at $330 million. That was the amount that was cut out for EMUs. And we had Auckland Transport come in the other day to a workshop, and they said, well, you know, that's a bit of a risk we've taken, and they could be required sooner than later. Were the government going to contribute in the same way for those EMUs? That
EMU timing is one, you're correct in that when that was looked at a while ago. There's a piece of work going on now where we continue to assess the rate of growth of the rail, and it's, I guess you might look at that as being a victim of its, of its own success, because we continue to need to look at what is almost an explosive growth of patronage there. So you're correct in that when that was, there was quite a lot of work done probably a couple of years ago, looking at when those extra trains would be needed, and that we were looking at the later half of the next decade is when they were needing. But we continue to, and you'd expect us to be looking at that, just to see whether that was, whether we were kidding ourselves or whether that was still the case. So the indications are, and if you plot the rapid growth we've had over the last couple of years, we're looking to say, well, actually, we need to start preparing for a procurement of more trains. You don't ring up one day and say, I'll have a new set of trains. There's some years involved in that process. So we're looking at that, when they would need to come on board. But the budget certainly recognised that there was a parking, if you like, of that element of the overall project budget. It's identified, so it's not a question of hiding everything. It's just moved out, and the timing of that was being geared to match the requirement.
Okay, because I was interested when I saw that they had been canned, and I thought, well, gosh, that doesn't give us any kind of leeway in the future if patronage really does pick up to the extent that we're talking about. And now I think you can hear people saying there's only 3-car trains running on the Western line, and there's not enough capacity in some of those trains when they get close to the city, which I think is something which we really need to keep the eye on the ball there. And the last one is bus systems. 78% of the people still use buses to public transport, and my concern is putting in temporary shelters of a reasonable standard at these new bus stops, because people aren't going to tolerate having to stand out in the rain when the winter comes around. But I can say in Wellesley Street, where the North Shore Express buses run from, there's no shelters, and it's a pretty bleak kind of environment. There's no electronic signs showing when the buses are going to be arriving. So I would hope that that can be improved, because it's going to be in that state for quite some time. And the same down at the bottom of Albert Street, where the Northern Express is going to be working from. I would hope that we're going to be getting shelters there to give people the ability to get out of the rain, wind, and that when it's inclement weather.
Yeah, we've got a group working through those at the moment, because we're going to be doing some more bus shifts in the middle of April, 2 or 3 weeks away. So there's discussions going on there now with the Edgehill crowd and all of those people to move, excuse me, to move the buses for that next phase, because that will involve getting the buses out of Queen Street, Lower Queen Street, so that construction work can start there.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, Councillor George. Councillor Bill.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Chris. I've got one question and a comment, if I can, sir.
Yep.
The question is, Chris, the Mayor spoke about the 124 odd projects, 6 billion over the next 6 years. Just the complexity of the work with the CRL once we're past the enabling, the number of actual work programs, if you like, different spheres of work to deliver that project. For instance, if you take the three-laning of the extensions from Hill Road down to Takini and the interchange, there's 24 separate projects there, each being delivered simultaneously as close enough as we can be. So the complexities of this tunnelling work, the stations, how many different projects are operating and going to be happening simultaneously or thereabouts?
I don't know what the total number is, and you're certainly correct in terms of the impact of a lot of simultaneous construction. If your question is sort of thinking about resourcing, we've just completed a month of industry engagement with the construction industry from around the world, sharing our views of how we might construct and package the project. And there is clearly a strong interest from internationally, from tunnellers and rail systems people. Tunnelling is obviously being done in New Zealand, but from the rail systems, and there's a lot of activity happening in Australia at the moment. My former projects in Sydney, they're hitting the straps about the same time, so there will be a competition for resource. But I have to say I was pleasantly surprised by the number of international constructors and tunnellers who are sort of fighting for the work that's in Australia at the moment, and there's a clear interest that they are wanting to participate. All of the major local contractors here have an intention of partnering with people overseas, so it is an international project. It's nothing that we're looking to do in our own backyard or from our own backyard.
Certainly the scale of the CRL plus the other transport modes is going to be massive, like this country's never seen. Are we looking at doing 24/7 work on these projects?
Some elements will be. Others, if you recognise, if you do projects of this sort, of the size in a city, that we've had to, as part of our consenting process, be obliged to maintain some fairly strict noise and vibration criteria for the community we're working there. We've got active work management plans that we've prepared as part of that initial approval. The contractors that we've got on board now, a large part of that work is the detailed construction consenting, because we're having to be mindful of the fact we're doing this in people's neighbourhood, and there will be disruption. You might argue if you were in some other regime where you could just let loose, you'd probably get things done a bit quicker, but we have to recognise the territory that we're working in.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I guess that's the compromise, isn't it? You can do a project quicker if you completely disrupt an environment massively or shut it out.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, you know. Would you shut the motorway from Hill Road to Takini to get the job going 24/7? And what disruptions would that cause, because there's no other modes? Can you shut the centre of Auckland down to hurry a project up, and there's no alternative for other modes of transport? So it's always a balancing act, and it's a very difficult one at that.
I guess a very good illustration of that is the very detailed work we've had to go through in the staging of the connection of the City Rail link with the North Auckland line at Mount Eden, where we have to keep a transport service running there. So we're going to be looking at running single line running, so you actually got to look at how do you maintain that frequency of service without overly complicating and restricting the construction work, because you want, ideally you'd shut it and you get on and do it. So all of those things are being teased out and optimised with the team.
They add time, add cost, don't they?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Bill. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, Chris, I suppose we're in a pretty good position right now because of the historic low interest rates. Is that helping at all in terms of financing of the project, or is that something that's already been put in place?
No, the financing is in place. Low interest always helps.
But that's, so we are being helped by low interest at the moment on this project.
As all of our funding is obviously being secured through council, so those same principles apply. Yeah.
Right. some years ago, when, you know, this has been a controversial project, I suppose, but there was talk about private-public partnership. Is there any private funding in this project at all?
Not in the, it's not been contemplated in for the project as such, but with each of the station designs, we've had done a lot of look, and in fact future-proofed each of the station facility buildings for development either over, above or alongside. So that, for example, outside Albert Street, the Glengarry site, the main entrance for Aotea, that structure has been allowed to do a major development over that. So part of my team is working that on every site.
Yeah, I was actually...
the nature, to answer the other part of your question, the nature of the project, and people talk about PPP projects for rail, and if you have a network that's appropriate for you, that is a working model, and those are successful around the world, where you have a brand new dedicated line, what you might call a metro line, where there is one operator working on one line, and the whole financing is set around the delivery model, where that operator succeeds or fails on the ability to run a rail service unfettered by other things that are on a line. If you look at this one, we share a network which is pretty ancient. We share it with the owner and the operator of a freight service. So there's not a working model that I've seen that would suggest that would be a privately financed outfit, other than there are development opportunities around each station where we'd be encouraging and in fact preparing for development associated with those.
Okay, thanks. I want to just, Councillor Lee asked some questions about the financial risk of the project, and you know there is a financial risk and a real risk of blowout. The Honolulu line from Pearl Harbor to downtown Honolulu is now well behind schedule and has gone $2 billion over budget. So, you know, we have to keep in mind that there is always going to be a financial risk of a blowout, and I'm aware of research that was done into 44 urban rail projects from a number of countries, North America and Europe and so forth. And the average cost escalation of those projects was 45%. So there is a real risk, is there not? And how will that risk be managed between ourselves and our funding partner, the government? If there is a blowout, how will that funding blowout be managed?
Those conversations with government are just commencing at an officer level. The risk of you're correct. There's always a risk of a project blowout. One of the real key drivers in our packaging strategy that I talked about before is how we would manage in a construction sense the risks associated with that. There are a number. We've done a lot of work in the geotechnical space, because tunnelling projects, obviously there's a risk around that. We've spent a lot of time and money and have done have something like 140 test bores around the alignment of the stations. We will probably do some more along the line in conjunction with the tenderers when they're doing their work to get that risk put aside. The structuring of the rail systems, as we're proposing them now, takes another major interface risk out of the project. So we've tried to structure the project in the best way possible to avoid the known hazards that are there. The real test of the cost will actually be when we get the market into place and who are putting their cards on the line as part of their tendering package.
That's right.
Yeah. So we're continuing to review. Our design's still going on. We recognise we haven't completed our design for the second part of the works yet. That's coming to play. So the next few months we'll be looking at that. We'll be optimising the construction and getting our best assessment of that cost that we can have before we go to tender. But the principle will be, from our point of view with government, that this is a shared venture with government and with council.
So if there is a blowout, of costs, there will be something in place to ensure that the burden of that cost blowout is not borne by the ratepayers or the travelling public of Auckland.
Yeah.
It'll be shared equally between the government. Any blowout will be shared equally between the government and the council.
That would certainly be where I would start from, but of course there are a lot more influential people than me in those negotiations. But that would obviously be, if it's a partnership and it's whatever that percentage is, the number that's always being talked about in my hearing is a 50% partnership. So those discussions would clearly have those obligations in play.
I hope you're right.
Very good. Councillor Wayne.
Sure, just got three questions for you. First one is just around the construction and demolition. There's going to be a lot of that. Are we ensuring in whatever way we can through the procurement process that as much of that is reused, recycled?
Yes, I've been very keen to use this project as an example of good practice in sustainability. We've actually working off a Sustainability Council of Australia, ISCA, working on a rating. Right? So actually, we've targeted an excellent rating out of that, and that really applies. We're applying in all our discussions. It goes through our design, our preparation for construction, our interaction with the Mana Whenua about the principles of sustainability, and all of those discussions are all very healthy and interesting, but they mean nothing unless you actually get them into obligations for the contractor. So working with the contractors we've got on board now, that's very much part of the thinking and the targets to make this an example of good sustainability practice, as we should. So I have a personal crusade about that anyway, or not as crusade, but it's driven me all my life. And so I was keen to get some targets and some structure into that subject, because otherwise all people do is talk about it. So that'll be a formal part of our contract.
That's excellent. The other issue that I've also raised with AT in the infrastructure meeting is around the opportunity to use the period when we're going to have a great deal of obviously building work, congestion problems for people in the inner city, to get people out of cars and onto public transport. Obviously there's a requirement to have that modal shift occurring across the region, because people start their trip often somewhere else. It could be up on the Hibiscus Coast, it could be down in Papakura. So as much and all as there's emphasis around the CRL, we also need to look at the whole system in terms of getting that mode shift, and the opportunity, I would suggest, to do some things that might be a little bit more radical, like putting in place a bike share scheme, such as other cities have. That might include electric bikes, might include electric cars, for example, that cities like Paris and many others have, so that we can make the most of the change and get that mode shift. And it is going to be critical to get people out of cars, because we know that we can't handle the numbers we've got now through this period.
So yes, enthusiastically yes. There is, there's a lot of work going on, and with council, with AT supported by government, about investing in getting people out of cars into cycles. That'll work for some people. That's not possible for others. But going to the point about this project is really, I look at that as a sort of a heavy backbone carrier in what is an integrated public transport system, and you'll be aware that Auckland Transport's undertaking a major rejig of that. The whole idea of having a frequent service that might involve an interchange is not unique to this country. It's what cities do everywhere. But it'll only work if you've actually got a heavy carrier, and I see the piece of work that we're doing on this project is a network enhancement to build the backbone, a rail backbone through the region, to allow that frequent interchange process to work. Okay. But the reality is people will in the end find a way that is acceptable to them. We obviously have an obligation to minimise that while we're doing big things, but cities grow and they have to change and evolve their travel habits.
And the last matter I'd just raise with you goes to risk, but also the allocation of costs. particularly if there is more money that needs to be spent. And that's really around the evidence-based acknowledgement that the government is sitting pretty on this project because the number of people that are going to use the CRL and the rail network is a direct substitute for the cars that are driving on the motorways and the investment that the government would otherwise have to spend on the motorways and also in Kiwi Rail. So I am concerned that we're really not getting as good a deal as we could have, and I would certainly hope that if there are any further costs going forward, that it is the government rather than the council that picks up the tab.
Yep, that was a statement. Yeah. Well done, Wayne. Councillor Cathy.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I had a question about grade separation of level crossings. In the ATAP report, one of your key outcomes is minimising harm, but I don't see any mention of it in the report, nor do I see it on your timeline between 2015 and 2045.
There's a lot of work going on, and I'm on the periphery of that in terms of the work with AT and Kiwi Rail in that whole ATAP study. I know that level crossings are very much part of that agenda. I'm not sure of the document that you're looking at there now, but certainly the level crossing is being very much of consideration. My direct involvement in that is when we're looking at all the timetabling and the modelling and looking at how you run the trains around the network now up until the CRL opens and beyond. And the level crossings have a material impact to that as well. So that there is some work going on in looking at how we would stage level crossing upgrades there. So I'm not quite sure of the issue you're raising.
I think I'd like to see it mentioned in the work of ATAP, because it's with the increased patronage of our public transport network comes increased use of the level crossings.
Sure, yeah.
And so I'd quite like to see it mentioned and as part of your update.
Okay, so could I take that as a note?
Yeah. Councillor Cathy, it's similar in terms of the response that Steve gave to George, and that is that there's quite a body of work going on yet over the next 3 months in terms of what the final agreed position might be around all of the transport infrastructure. So what you have seen there is the present state. There's a lot of modelling going on around, so if we put more money into level crossings, will we get more bang for bucks in terms of transport outcomes? All right, so all of that stuff will be a part of the discussions and then a final plan that we will sign off. Councillor Cam.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions have kind of been alluded to by some councillors and Chris, but I suppose what I'm seeking comfort and assurance on, as we all will be, is around our negotiation team and our officers really driving hard that funding split and funding timing of the CRL. I note that the government are certainly expecting a robust discussion, with Mr Key saying on his State of the Nation address when he brought forward it to 2020 that these discussions will include how project costs will finally be shared between government. Yet in our own paper, we have it as a kind of an adjunct. These issues to be negotiated as part of the joint business plan are expected to include ownership governance, project risk and funding details. So I just hope that we're not taking the 2020 date that will enable main works by council in 2018 as a given. I know they've brought it forward by 10 years, but I would like to see our officers and our negotiators continue to challenge that, because if that money comes in 2020 in 4 years' time, that'll effectively mean the council and ratepayers have been on the hook for this project alone for nearly a decade. I appreciate it, that it's a capitalised project, but that sees 10 years. And so they brought it forward once from 2030 to 2020, and I'd like to see there's an election year next year. I certainly would like to see that 2020 notion challenged. And also their increase, as Councillor Wood alluded to, and as we would all want to see, that 40% that's written into our LTP assumptions, that certainly needs to be lifted and needs to be driven hard. And finally, again, from following on from what Councillor Quack said about project risk, we really, this is a project that when it was first reported, well, it's been reported for decades, but when the numbers started to be crunched publicly in the mid-2000s, it was $500 million. And so it has gone up nearly 5-6-fold, and it's stabilised now, but we certainly need to make sure that the government is liable on that project risk and is going to be carrying more than their fair share on that. And also covering what Councillor Darby said, Mr Mayor, on improvements, regeneration, mitigation, not just reinstatement of Albert Street. Look, I know it's not going to be part of that funding envelope, but it should be part of our negotiations. NZTA now do huge regeneration around motorway projects, bypasses, arterial improvements and that. And I know this is a unique project and it should be treated as such, and I'd like to think that post-completion that the government is still going to be a party to improvements on Albert Street. As unusual as that may sound, this project is unusual. It's a government council project, and so they should not leave us at completion. They should stay with us until we've got Albert Street to the standard we want it.
Thank you. Yes, endorse.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Alf.
No, all good.
Right. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, well, look, thank you. I think I'm pleased that there's been a good wide-ranging discussion, mostly our talks with regard to this project since we agreed it in the Auckland plan nearly 5 years ago now, have been primarily around the budgetary side. And we now have this project which as Councillor Lee has referred to, which has been talked about and promoted since actually 1923. Up and moving, and just talking about costings, one figure that really rings in my head was when Dubmeyer Robinson was promoting as the Mayor of Auckland City in the 60s, it was estimated at $140 million. So you snooze, you lose. And we know that with these very, very big projects, time is money, and this is a lesson for all future councils. And it's certainly a lesson for the government, and just reflecting on the government and its commitment to ATAP and to the finalisation of the contract for the City Rail Link. Firstly, the Minister of Transport is clearly very focused in ensuring that we arrive at a conclusion mid-year in terms of this project and its negotiation. We clearly will be keeping you well informed as to how those are going and take all the matters on board. We obviously are going to be driving for a stronger deal as the Prime Minister and his colleagues, but we do want a deal. So I will reserve all the rest of my comments really to the sod turning, which we are working very, very strongly on getting done in May. And so that would be an occasion really for us to celebrate a outstanding outcome for this first United Auckland Council, but also an opportunity to remind us that we're standing on the shoulders of great men and women who have led this through over many, many decades. So we've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. I'll move that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, Councillor. Right, what I'm proposing to do now is have a break for 5 minutes, and then we will climb back into the rest of the agenda. So we'll call a pit stop.
Got to go to the local government conference, really, Cameron?
to item 12. And we will, we've got recommendations there. And councillors, we have, as you can see from that, the 14 and 15 attendees, we've had 1 or 2 extra councillors who have attended. This is sort of a volunteer situation for those who would like to attend. Local Government New Zealand and the mayors, chairs and councillors from around the country really appreciate our presence. They appreciate the presence of the local board members. I know this is at the bottom of New Zealand. It's going down to Dunedin, but it's critical whether it was right in our own neighbourhood or whether it was at the other end of the country. So I'd be happy if there was, if there were any other members of the council who would like to go down on this occasion. Councillor Kelly?
I don't really care who goes, but what I'd like to make sure is whoever goes on behalf of this council expresses concern at the lack of female presentations at the conference. It's infuriated elected members. You're obviously unaware.
Yeah, I am sorry.
There is none.
There's no female presenters?
There's no presenters.
How do you mean? Well, as in,
Madam, through you, Mr Chair, I am actually on the committee of organising the conference. We are very aware. There is Dame Margaret Paisley. What we have to do for these conferences is to get the best people.
Okay.
And we did in this case.
Right, so you're talking about keynote speakers. You're talking about keynote speakers, Kathy.
Keynote speakers.
So whoever goes, I would like to make sure that the views of elected members that have been expressed to me is the lack of female representation at a national conference. It's absolutely outrageous.
It's not.
Oh, right, okay, well, I just need to get quite clear. So are we talking about the number of delegates from around the councils that appear? Are we talking about keynote speakers?
Content and keynote speakers.
Right, keynote speakers, right, okay, I've got that. Okay, well, we'll pass that back.
It has been expressed to a conference at Zone 1 meeting. If councillors would like to turn up at Zone 1 meetings, they can make those comments there.
Okay, well, they can
I've
certainly
just
make
done,
them around the
I'll
table.
make it official if you like. I'll move something so that it is official.
No,
This
very
is the
happy to
governing
pass
body
that.
of Auckland Council. You are the representative.
Yeah, we will, as I said, we'll pass that message on. I think it's a very well-made comment. Councillor Bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I didn't wish to, or put my hand up to attend the conference last year. I went when I was on the local board. I don't recall which year it was. This year, I would be interested in attending, and I'd like to explain, if I could, the reason why. Is coming to this council shortly, either through Councillor Wood or Councillor Wayne's committees, will be a resolution that Otago, Canterbury and Southland regional councils are putting forward about wilding pines. Well, the issue is that you all know about the wilding pines and how they were introduced by the government to stop erosion in the high country. They are slowly encroaching down through the foothills and across the Mackenzie Basin. And the estimation that I've seen done by the scientists in the south is that in 25 years, you will not be able to see the Southern Alps when you drive down the Mackenzie country. And
that's right.
I sort of spoke to to Phil Wilson about perhaps this council should stand beside those regional councils and say, we actually think that's a view shaft of particular national significance that we need to protect, and stand by those councils and advocating to the government for some funding for a program to help that. So that would be a reason, if my fellow councils would agree, that I'd like to attend to stand beside those regional councils in doing that.
Very good. Well, look, councillors, it's very much on the sort of the volunteer side of things. Councillor Linda?
I'm happy to go, Mr Chairman. I didn't attend last year.
Okay, and Councillor Alf?
Only because of the Te Maruata subcommittee that I'm the councillor for, Local Government New Zealand. That's why I didn't end up putting the name forward. They have representatives going from Te Maruata, but as part of the only councillor on Te Maruata.
Right, so we've got Councillor John?
No, I just want to ask a question, that's all.
Yep, where you go.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, in light of the fact that it's a local government conference, why the registration cost is so high. Presumably that goes for all local government across New Zealand. Why is it $1,500?
It is the same price for all participants across New Zealand.
Yes, I understand that, Marguerite, but I'm just wondering why it's so high given it's local government.
Yep, Steve, how about that?
Well, because you can't make it cheap. It's going to absorb the
This has
cost.
been threshed around by LGNZ, Mr Mayor, for a number of years, and the conference is a self-funding venture, and it does help to, you know, it creates a revenue stream for LGNZ which would otherwise be collected through higher membership levies. They've been very open about that, and they have a conference model that is designed to be self-funding and provide a small surplus to LGNZ in the process.
Okay, Councillor Chris?
Maybe this isn't the time, but I want to have the opportunity at some stage, and maybe it's post the conference on the 24th of July. For a long time I've wondered, in terms of value for money, what we as Auckland get out of local government New Zealand. And so I'd just like the delegates that are going to go on our behalf, not to just look at it as business as usual, but to look at it through the lens of Auckland is in a slightly different situation than some of the other councils. And yes, we have obligations in terms of being the largest city and supporting our brothers and sisters in local government, but when we are looking at all areas of expenditure, I have been concerned that we haven't given the level of scrutiny that we should to our involvement with local government New Zealand. So I just hope, in terms of Councillor Cashmore, Filipina and Cooper, that they are willing to give consideration to that as our conference delegates.
I've got Councillor Penny W, who will comment, because this was an issue and discussion at our last council meeting last week. It's always a live issue, and I would have thought that you would have a serious discussion about it at the start of every term as to whether or not, I mean, I've always been very clear in my leadership that I felt it was a critical part of the role that we need to play as a part of local government in New Zealand. If we were not there, that will be a third out of local government New Zealand, and it could even bring to end local government New Zealand.
Yeah.
So it is a very, very serious question for us, and for me, more than anything, it was about us showing good faith to the nation in the most simple way that we possibly could. I'm really happy for us to come back from the conference and then address the issue, the broader issue, and whether or not we could or should suggest changes that might address any of the issues that would be evident around the table. I think there is a live issue to do with local boards. They are not specifically acknowledged in the Local Government New Zealand Constitution, and so we need to have that addressed, and also to address how the boards, given their unique place in local government New Zealand, would be better represented and or feel more welcomed at local government. So I think there's a live issue there that the council is acutely aware of and would probably want to try and start a process of addressing through the annual conference. But as I say, I think Councillor Christine, aside from any debrief that we might have, it would be a question, and particularly for the new mayor, usually addressed in the first meetings of the new council, as to whether the Auckland Council will continue its commitment there. Councillor Penny, would you like to add?
I would, Mr Mayor. I mean, this has been something that's worried me for quite some time. I mean, as chair of Zone 1, I've struggled with attendance at Zone 1 meetings. Zone 1 is the whole of the north, from Auckland North. Honourable John Carter is the deputy chair. We have been talking about what we could and couldn't do. The suggestion that I have made to yourself and to others is that we should really have a presentation from Malcolm Alexander as the CEO of Local Government New Zealand to one of our committees of the whole, so that people around the table can actually understand what local government does. Local government in the last few years has certainly picked up its game. They are very much alongside government and have ear of government. And I think when you look at issues such as fresh water, that I know Councillor Cashmore and myself are a bit worried about, and the costs that that's going to put on local government, we actually do need to understand around this table just what local government does for councils per se, and where we can fit in, because it is a discussion that probably needs to be had at the beginning of each council session, but I do think, on the other hand, we actually need to understand what they do as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way of.
I think it would, and I'd also welcome, we have a very fine director of democracy who is looking at governance more generally, and maybe that is an issue that Phil Wilson can pick up for us at the appropriate time.
So can I also add, after the last meeting, because local boards have been talking to John Carter and Malcolm Alexander, and there is a move to maybe make them a sector group with their own representation, so, and even send maybe a representative to sit on National Council. So that is in the pipeline as well.
All right, well, as I say, we didn't get much of a manual.
No,
And
we didn't,
so, you know, we're sort of still trying to work it out bit by bit. Now, Councillor George.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've been around local government for a few years now, and I say that Mr Malcolm Alexander actually was here last week, and I think gave a very good presentation on thoughts that he has in relation to how local government can improve in the future. And I don't know how many councillors are at that, but I think it was an excellent way forward that he was talking about. It really behoves us as a council to engage with local government New Zealand. I don't think we should be too critical of them, because they are the link between local government and central government. And in the past, it's been a pretty tenuous, rocky road. And I think at the moment it seems as if it's going along reasonably well. So to be too critical of local government New Zealand is, I don't think, in our interest. And I know that there's cost, and people criticise conferences. The conference is only one part of the yearly program of this organisation. So I've always supported people going to conferences, because I think a lot comes out in the discussion sessions, breakout sessions. So, you know, I think we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Mr Chairman, it's important that my request be undertaken not as in any way disrespectful of local government New Zealand, but simply looking at the value for money component of Auckland Council.
Look, it's an open discussion, and local government New Zealand's always been aware of that. You know, their great fear was that when we came together as an amalgamated council, that we would just pull the chain. And the fact that we haven't has been hugely appreciated across large, small councils right across the country. And, you know, that's against the backdrop of the fact that absolutely the ratepayers will be looking at us saying, well, is this value for money? Is it appropriate for us to be in there? And we should just constantly hold that open for discussion and reflection, which is exactly what we'll do when we get back from conference. Councillor Penage?
Thank you. And just a couple of things, Mr Mayor. I've just had a quick look at the presentation list for the conference, and Councillor Casey's quite right. I think there's a singular lack of women presenters, which in a place-making conference does seem rather bizarre, so I think we do need to raise that. The other issue, and we've canvassed a little bit of it, is local government New Zealand at the moment is really struggling with the amalgamation agenda and what that means. And to not have Auckland participating actively in the warts and all, good, bad and ugly discussion around amalgamations just would seem quite odd. So it's not only what they can give us, it's what we can give them. And I think Councillor George was right in raising that kind of interface with government role as well. local government is undergoing a huge transformation in New Zealand, whether we want it or not, and the rest of the country is kind of looking to the Auckland experience for some advice around that. The other part, Mr Mayor, is there's also the really big issue of the drifts to the city and the impact on our smaller councils as they struggle to actually pay for infrastructure. And Auckland has a role in that bigger discussion on behalf of New Zealand Inc. about how we actually support our other councils. And, you know, as you say, us simply stepping aside and stepping out of this, because, you know, to be honest, we could probably rub along without Local Government New Zealand. It's a little bit of a middle finger up in the air to the rest of New Zealand pulling out, and that point is made time and time again at the zone meetings and at the meetings with Local Government New Zealand. So, you know, the rest of the country isn't exactly always enamoured with Auckland. I think we need to get in and do our bit alongside our brother and sister councils. Hopefully a little bit more of the sister council rather than just the brother councils.
Nice. Okay, well, we've got 3 names in there, plus the 3 that we're taking, and so unless I hear anything distinctly to the contrary, we've got a mover and a seconder. Do we have a mover and a seconder? I'll move that. Councillor
I'd just make the observation there are a number of speakers that I have an interest in. Having said that, I would prefer not to go. So depending on how I get on, I'd like to just supply some information perhaps to the councillors that are going anyway.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That'd be great.
I'll second.
You'll second? Thank you, Councillor Ross. Right, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Thank you very much. By acclamation. Right, move on next to the order of names on voting documents. Councillors, just put things in order so that we can have something to move. There you go. We've got Chair's recommendations there. Right. Warwick. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, firstly to note, the Waiheke Local Board has had a meeting after this agenda was distributed, so that was last Thursday night. Very good. So they're recommending a pseudo-random order of names. So just very briefly, the background to the situation is that the council's got the ability to recommend to decide the order of names on the voting document. At the previous 2013 elections, other metropolitan councils went random order. So we thought we should commission some research to look at so that we could make a decision on whether we should stay alphabetical or go random. That research has been done. From our view, there is no compelling reason to change from alphabetical to random.
There's
no compelling reason. Okay, councillors, look, got a recommendation there.
I'll move it.
Well, I've done that. Is there so you'd like to second it, George?
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Ross.
What do the health boards do, and why do they do it differently if they do it differently? My understanding is they do. Or is that just STV they do?
Transferable vote that way. Your Worship, the district health boards, each of them, and the licensing trusts, each of them are able to make the same decision. At the 2013 elections, some went random, some didn't. They have the same sort of discussion we're having.
Yeah. Did they have any research that validated the idea to go to random?
Not that I'm aware of, no. So with the district health boards, the electoral officer, Dale Ofsowski, provides the report for them to base their decision on, sets out the pros and cons, and they make the decision accordingly. Our intention is to provide Mr Ofsowski with the outcome of this meeting so that he can convey to the district health boards and the licensing trusts what this meeting decides, and hopefully we'll get some consistency. Councillor John.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note the comment here that the initial research, international research, didn't really correlate with what happens in Auckland largely, and that it was, booth voting. And I know that we did some analyses of the 2 elections from from the council perspective. One thing, and I think you highlight it yourself, that does merit a bit more investigation, I think, is the impact of that candidate booklet, because any comments that I've received is that it's incredibly unfriendly in the sense of its bulk, of actually locating people and the inclusion of the health board stuff in there. So I understand what you said about those 2 elections, but I think definitely that has to be looked at. It's not helpful. People comment on the fact that, you know, they don't bother reading it, or alternatively they spend literally hours trying to wade their way through it. I think that is something that needs to be improved, and it merits an investigation in terms of how it might impact on voters. Either it's too hard, or it's so unfriendly that it's almost counterproductive to that quest to try and get more people to actually vote in local body elections.
Yes, we're very aware that it is pretty unfriendly and difficult to navigate your way through. And that is one of the reasons where we actually are recommending alphabetical, because at least the names on your voting paper and the names in the booklet are in the same order, and to try and find your way through it. We are working with Dale Osowski and with New Zealand Post to make the booklet more user-friendly. So there's a couple of things that we're looking at, such as color tabs, so you can try and find your way around it. We are limited in the size and the format of the booklet because of the weight, and because it's got an impact on postage, and therefore it's got an impact on price. But we're trying our best to try and make it as friendly as possible within the constraints that we're working on.
All right, Councillor Ross again.
Sorry, I don't know whether this is part of this, but it does seem you mentioning the booklet of that. Are we ensuring this time that when candidates put in their 50 words, that the 50 words are left as they put them in and not played around with inappropriately or appropriately? Because I made a complaint last time that there were 5 words, 5 capitalisations put in which were inappropriate, and it was done by, I believe a part-time temp person who came in just to do it. And yet some people put in things that really are quite unreadable, and they should be left unreadable because it indicates not a hell of a lot of thought and proofreading on their part. So can you comment on that, what we're doing this year? Are we going to leave the 50 words that people put in as they put them in, or are we going to try and play with them?
So the reason why we had problems last time was actually a system issue, because we basically the candidate statements needed to be retyped and into the Votex system, which produces the booklet. So I think there were some sort of typing mistakes and typos as part of it. And this time around, we'll be able to transfer directly into the system the text that is provided by candidates as it is.
Very good. Okay, any other questions or comments? I've got a recommendation there. I'll move that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, passed. Right, item 14, audit and risk, revised terms of reference. We got the recommendations there with the revised terms of reference, which, as you will note, are primarily directed to the next mayor and governing body. Councillor Bill, perhaps you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was covered off by the Audit and Risk Committee. It's trying to move this council's self-auditing program and its work with Audit New Zealand into a more modern era, and the best practice these days is to have more professionals and accountants and audit professionals on the Audit and Risk Committee. There was a suggestion that perhaps we only have 1 or 2 elected members. We thought that have a 3-3 balance was more appropriate, but with the chair being appointed as one of the independent directors. So the Audit and Risk Committee sort of approved that, and it stands as our recommendation to go forward to the next triennial.
Very good.
Council.
Are you moving
I'm happy
it?
to
I'll
move that.
second it.
I'll move it.
The move and seconder. Thank you. Right, it was a race. Councillor Chris Darby, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Cashmore, for this. I only have one concern, and that's about the quorum. It's mentioned on 102, and we're signing up to that too. I'd be concerned about a quorum where, for a meeting of audit and risk, only having one elected member. I would prefer to see that at 2, considering the balance of the committee are independents, and wanted to know maybe from Councillor Cashmore in the first instance how the recommendation came forward as just being 1. Is there scope for increasing that to 2, considering it is a committee of the council in the first instance?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, we did talk a bit about the what the quorum should be. This was also sort of following on what the practice is, but my personal view is the attendance at Audit and Risk Committee is very, very good, with many members who actually aren't even members of the committee showing up. So I would not see or envisage any problem at all of having 2 elected people to make up part of that quorum.
So you're happy for that sort of change?
I don't have any issue with that, unless Mr McNaughton has some advice.
If the balance is okay, if we can make that minor amendment, I think it would be healthy for governance.
Yep, I agree. Do we need to put that by way of resolution? I think we can just do that, can't we? It's on the addition. Make a note of that. Please make sure that comes through. Anything else, councillors? Right, I'll move that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, passed. Thank you. Right, now we move to the item of extraordinary business. Councillors received a motion from Councillor Mike Lee, seconded by Councillor Kathy Casey. This is a notice of motion. When I first received this, I reflected on whether or not it was something that I should accept as a part of this agenda, on the basis that the role for our memberships lies with the Chief Executive Officer, Stephen. But I then also recalled that we had a debate on exactly the same issue in 2013. Debate failed at that time, and on that basis, having set a precedent, whatever my view on the merits or otherwise of it, I felt that it was important therefore us to discuss this matter here today and to enable the discussion to occur. Now, as I said at the outset, I want to just enable Stephen and staff to put this in context in terms of what has been proposed, and then obviously start the debate with Councillor Mike and Councillor Kathy. But given the fact that we are here discussing or proposed discussion relating to Auckland Council's corporate membership in the Property Council of New Zealand, this is a matter that sits specifically within the purview of the Chief Executive Officer. It is a matter that therefore I want the Chief Executive Officer to reflect on firstly, to give us advice and to reflect back to us his views in terms of whether or not the issue is one that he, as the Chief Executive Officer, would consider in his role for determining the management of our corporate memberships generally. And I think you'll find there 250, give or take. So, look, councillors, I think that the fairest and best way to handle this matter is to give Steve the opportunity, as the person with the delegated authority here, to reflect on the matter, and then we can take the discussion from there.
Do you want me to move it first, Mr Mayor?
Oh, I've done that. It's moved in your name and Kathy's name. I've acknowledged that, so I'm happy for the matter to sit on the floor, moved by Councillor Mike Lee and seconded by Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We felt that it was imperative that we do take the time to give you the background to this matter, and also to have some independent advice for you about conflicts of interest, because clearly when the unitary plan comes back and with its recommendations from the Independence Hearings Panel, you'll be thinking about those matters. So we thought it was appropriate to give you a piece of comprehensive advice about the issues of conflict so that you can reflect on them and ask both Meredith Connell and Catherine for further advice if you wish, or some interpretation of that advice. In respect of the corporate memberships, and contrary to the public input earlier today, there is no secret about who council is a member of, and we've furnished that list back in 2013. It was made public, and we've repeated it here for you, and the media are most welcome to have it. So the group, so the CCOs and the council, we are variously members of all sorts of organisations, and those decisions are made by the respective chief executive, or through, as often is the case, a delegation to a senior manager or a budget holder who would be better placed to evaluate the benefit and cost of being a member of that particular organisation. You'll see from the schedule that some memberships are corporate, while others might pertain to an individual. And, you know, there are many on the list that might variously be described as including lobbying in their activities that they undertake. And Local Government New Zealand would be a prime example of that. And it would be at the top end of our membership subscriptions at some $400,000 plus. Which is quite a bit less than the legacy councils used to pay to LGNZ as 8 separate organisations. So we are over the period of renewal. We have been actively looking at costs and benefits, and we have been with some organisations where their rules provide for it, if we can achieve a group membership rate rather than each CCO joining up, we have done that, and the Property Council is a good example of that. So the membership fee that will be calculated for us for the period April 2016 to March 2017, so it's an April to March financial year for the Property Council. The group fee will be $37,502 plus GST, and the apportionment of that is not yet calculated, and that will happen between the Property Council and the members. And this membership will cover Auckland Council, RFA, Auckland Transport, and Panuku Development Auckland. The costs of membership of the Property Council have been trending downwards over the life of this council. It's a variable amount because we participate in training with the Property Council, and we pay separate amounts for participating in training activities that we have an interest in and want to be part of.
That's excellent.
Might be useful to Your Worship to invite Meredith Connell and Catherine just to come and answer any questions about the advice that they've provided for you.
Okay, so the issue raised by the notice of motion, councillors, as Stephen has reflected on thus far, is the quite complicated issue of conflict, either legal or perceived. One is within a legal framework and the other is in the court of public opinion. And so Stephen has appropriately, given his role, asked for advice that not only talks about conflict generally, which is timely, but conflict specifically as it might apply to the concerns raised by Councillor Mike and Councillor Kathy. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. With me I've got Anna Adams from Meredith Connell, who's prepared the advice that you've seen. In short point that I'll make before I hand over to Anna and any questions that you may have, the general proposition that comes through very strongly in the advice, and which is entirely consistent with the advice that the governing body received in 2013 when this issue arose, can be looked at in isolation of it being the Property Council or any other entity of which we have membership, is that the best way for elected members to immunise themselves from any concern of an allegation of bias and decision making is to adopt the orthodox approach that most entities do, where it's an administrative decision of the chief executive via delegated authority as to where corporate membership is to be held, and to leave the governing members of this entity, or whether they be directors of any other entity, free from those decisions so that they're not actively involved in that decision making.
Right. Anna, have you got anything to add?
Your Worship, thank you. The essence of Meredith Connell's advice is that the Council's institutional membership of the Property Council doesn't give rise to a legal conflict of interest for the governing body members in making the unitary plan decisions. And the reasons for this, in short, are that conflicts of interest are matters that affect decision makers, and the decision makers on the unitary plan are the governing body members as individuals, and the decisions obviously I'm referring to are those in July and August to accept or reject the hearings panel recommendations. The interests and memberships of the Council as an institution are relevant as potential conflicts only to the extent that they can be attributed to governing body members or said to have a great influence on them. So, for example, if a councillor was prominent in the Property Council, say a vice president and who shaped the submissions, that might give rise to a concern. Or if a councillor politically endorsed something to do with the Property Council, that might give rise to a concern. But in general, the interests of the Council as an institution don't give rise to conflicts for governing body members. And you can see why this is logical, because obviously the interests of Council as an institution are vast. In the unitary plan, it's a promoter, it's a submitter, it's a landowner. And if all of those interests of Council as an institution created conflicts of governing body members, it wouldn't be possible to take a decision. So in this case, we understand that the Council's membership of the Property Council is institutional. It was decided by the Chief Executive. It's one of hundreds of organisations. There are no governing body members playing a key role in the Property Council, as we understand. And in that circumstance, our conclusion was that the membership of the Property Council cannot be attributed to the governing body members as any form of conflict. However, we have also looked in our advice, sort of springboarded off the notice of motion that's been put forward. And the concern that we raised in our advice is that if that notice of motion is passed, there is a potential for what you might call the opposite situation to develop, whereby councillors that voted to terminate the Property Council's membership on the grounds that the Property Council was a submitter to the unitary plan could later on in July and August, when the unitary plan decisions have been taken, expose themselves to the suggestion that they made that vote because they took a particular view of the Property Council submissions, you know, favourable, disfavourable, whatever it is. And that starts to give rise to a concern that there is an association between the Property Council's positions and the members of the governing body, and gives rise to the possibility of at least allegations of bias or predetermination or conflict. So it's for that reason that we advised the Council that the more legally secure course is to allow membership of these kind of external organisations to rest with the Chief Executive, so that you retain the independence of the governing body members, the legal security that you have at the moment, and that you don't essentially muddy the waters by taking a political position on those organisations.
Okay, Anna. Well, look, Councillor Kathy, do you actually want to ask a question? Yep, sure.
Can I just make a point of order? I was emailed this legal advice by the Chief Executive's office earlier this week, and it was marked confidential and legally privileged, which is in ordinary English means secret, so it is now not confidential and not legally privileged, or how does it work now legally, this advice? Meredith Connell, confidential and legally privileged. It's out now, is it? Yep.
The advice is confidential and legally privileged. We are discussing it in an open forum which waives the privilege over that item, and I understand it has already been received by the media.
Yep. Funny that. Funny that.
All good.
So it's no longer secret?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cathy.
Someone leaked it, stop being secret.
Just a question, Anna, if I follow your reasoning correctly, anyone who votes for this notice of motion today can then be claim come July, August that we have a conflict of interest. That's what you've just said.
Not necessarily. What we highlighted was that there was a risk of that occurring.
Challenge.
So, just be clearer than that. This whole opinion here says that. It says the risk of supporting this is too great because there would be a legal risk with regard to conflict of interest. So surely today's vote you should be recommending is null and void for fear of currying favour.
What our legal advice is that the councillors and the governing body are in a legally secure position at the moment because they are not associated at all. None of you are associated with the positions of the Property Council. However, if councillors vote on a motion that appears to take a position on the positions of the Property Council, then you create a risk later on that you would be accused of viewing the Property Council submissions with favour or disfavour, and that is a risk of someone suggesting that you have predetermined your position on the Property Council submissions. That's our advice.
So your advice is clear that anybody voting in support of this today is being put at risk. Is that what you're saying? Because that's what I hear.
The other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the concerns that we're looking to address with all elected members around this table as we move towards the unitary plan decision making is to make sure that all of you have got good advice at the time, and I've referred to this before in the lead up, that independent advice available to all elected members about their position in terms of any conflict. That will be an option available to all members. Somebody voting today on this motion, that would be one of the matters that you'd expect to be raised in that context as to whether it could be seen to be a predetermination or bias. We can't draw a conclusion on that because it will also be in the context of other matters that we don't yet know will unfold between now and your decision making in August on the unitary plan. But as from an organisational perspective, and the matter that Stephen and I have addressed and the motivation for providing the information in advance of this discussion is really to bring the bigger picture about its integrity of the unitary plan decision making itself. We want to ensure that there is least legal risk of anyone who's dissatisfied with the decisions that are made in August having an avenue to raise a challenge through way of bias. So that will be something that will be important to every member around this table.
Yep, that's good. Okay, now...
A second question for the Chief Executive. How much did the advice cost?
I don't have the bill yet, so I don't know.
It's mounting up.
Yeah.
Stop asking questions, Kathy.
Okay. Right, Councillor Ross.
It cost 30,000 plus the unitary plan.
I'm going to disappoint some people by indicating I'm not going to support this motion, but I'm actually really interested in this conflict of interest, in this predetermination. And Catherine, could you, because we got the strong advice when it came to the out of scope, withdrawing the out of scope provisions for the unitary plan, that if you voted for that, you could show predetermination. If you voted against that, meaning you supported council putting an out of scope without consultation, isn't that also indicating predetermination? Can you not get whacked on the other side just as much as you can on the other side, both sides?
I cannot exclude that possibility.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor.
So in this context, you know, for example, depending on where the discussion goes, one option would be for the notice of motion to be withdrawn, to not put anyone in that position.
Thank you.
Yep. Just to reflect on the advice that's been given thus far, we presently, without the notice of motion, do not sit in a conflict situation. None of us around the table do. And just to recall, because this is an important discussion, so I ask you to give me a bit of latitude here, but just to recall that I have said from the very early stages of this, in fact I was talking about this 5 years ago, we want to arrive at the decision making with all of us intact, and all of us being able to be participating in the discussion. So that is why it's timely and useful to actually get this advice. And so I've got Councillor Dick next, please.
Yeah, just a question to Meredith Connell. Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Property Council?
Yes, the firm, a number of individual lawyers in the firm who work in property law have been members for some time, and I understand that last year that was converted to a global corporate membership because it was more economic to do so. And yes, our lawyers do go to property council events, and they use it as a professional education and networking organisation. We are also members of many organisations such as the Law Society, so it's on a par. But I can reassure the councillor that has no influence whatsoever on our legal advice.
You never declared that though, did you?
Shouldn't that have been declared?
Well, the question has been asked, and it's a fair question.
No,
It's
but
been answered.
when we got the written advice, should that conflict, if you like,
I'm happy to address that, Mr Mayor. It has a law firm's membership of these kinds of professional organisations cannot have any bearing ethically and professionally on the advice it gives. That would be a breach of our professional duties.
Should have been declared.
That's fair enough.
Oh, hang on.
That's a good answer.
Lawyers are not above the law.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Right, Councillor Wayne.
Sure, just got a question. First of all, I just acknowledge the comment that you make about the merits of membership being determined by officers rather than councillors. But the issue that concerns me that goes to perception is what we've had recently is a situation where the Property Council has been directly critical of councillors. On the 15th of February, they put out a media release, the title of which was Local Politicians Politicising of Proposed Auckland Unitary Plan Appalling. And I could generate a number of quotes from that. Certainly around the legacy that various councillors leave behind, references to election year, scaremongering, and so on. So this was openly critical of councillors, in my opinion, and this is my opinion. It was not correct because it's second guessing why I voted and why other councillors voted a particular way, which essentially was around process and issues of natural justice and fairness that we made very clear at the meeting. So here we have one instance where the Property Council, in a media release, has been openly critical of councillors. And I guess the question I would ask is that sort of thing appropriate, and would the Chief Executive and the officers look at our membership of an organisation like that and any other organisation and question whether, frankly, our council should be a member of another organisation that is openly critical of certainly members of the governing body here? Is that appropriate?
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Wayne, I think the best person to answer that is Stephen, because recall it's his responsibility to manage the relationship. So, Steve?
Look, I think through you, Your Worship, there are a number of organisations that the council and or CCOs are members of that make statements that are favourable of council and quite critical of council. It's in the nature of the purpose of those organisations. I think, I can think of the Chamber of Commerce passing comments about the council and its perceptions and impressions of our performance.
My favourite chamber.
The Employers and Manufacturers Association would be another. So, as the decision maker, we obviously we reflect on, how is an organisation that we're a member of discharging its own purpose, and is it one of the things that we would think about is do we see it acting in a fair and even-handed way? And we can't expect that all of the organisations that we're associated with will be saying things that councillors and staff might find always to be favourable. That's part of our open democracy that we live in. If we had a membership of an organisation that appeared to be running a campaign that was counter to the purpose of the Auckland Council and our goals and objectives, we might reflect on that differently, and we might also have some informal discussions with people about is this the right thing for us to be involved in? Since I've been your Chief Executive, I haven't had occasion to do that with an organisation, but it may happen in the future, who knows?
Okay, just have a couple of questions relative to this. Do we have any guidelines in place for how we handle circumstances where there are, I would suggest, very objectionable comments by an organisation of which we're a member, particularly an instance where, as I say, it is targeted directly at councillors?
Councillor Wayne, it's just not councillors.
That's part of the job.
I mean, if I were to take umbrage at every time some organisation around Auckland decided they didn't like what the Mayor was sort of doing in terms of the City Rail Link or something or other, and they've all had various comments. There has to be some scope for robust debate. And I mean, we're members of the EMA, we're members of the Chamber of Commerce.
We buy the Herald on a regular basis.
Yeah, we buy the Herald on a regular basis, absolutely. So, there's got to be some scope for a bit of give and take in the public domain. And so I accept the fact that you feel slighted, but what I think has been proposed here is the fact that you shouldn't allow that to necessarily impact on your judgment in the overall scheme of things.
I can assure you
there's got to be scope for robust debate.
It doesn't impact on my judgment.
Oh, good. That's great.
My question to the Chief Executive was around whether we have any guidelines in place so that when there is something that's pretty obvious, that's directed at council, that we would at least have some engagement on our part, because I don't want to be seen to be engaging with the property council, because if I did that, somebody might say, well, gee, you're showing a conflict of interest in the like. So I'm really not in a position to do that, but I would suggest the organisation is and should be on our behalf, particularly when there are matters that I would suggest are factually incorrect.
So you're asking the CEO for his views on what he might do in the event that it's over the odds.
What guidelines do we have? How do we handle this kind of situation?
Yeah.
Well, so we don't have it, through you, Your Worship, we don't have any written guidelines about what to do. I can imagine that would be require an encyclopedia of helpful hints. So look, we're using our experience and our judgment. There have been a number of occasions where we will meet with an organisation to express our view about their view. That is what you would expect in a business-to-business relationship. In this particular case, where you're taking exception to something that's being said about you as a councillor, as an elected leader of the council, I don't actually see any problem with you engaging with the Property Council and telling their chief executive that you don't like what they had to say. I mean, I can't see any problem with that. Again, as long as you're clear that you've thought about the issues going forward when you come to make decisions.
Yeah, Councillor Wayne, there's a cause of action. Councillor John.
Can we speak to this item now, Mr Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
no, hang on. No, sorry. We're going to have Councillor Mike and Councillor Kathy speak first. We're just basically dealing with questions at this time. I've got the next question is Councillor Cam.
Oh, thank you. My question is, if we removed, or if the mover and seconder were to remove the reference of unitary plan, i.e. that the governing body, in recognition of the council's statutory planning role and in order to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, direct the Auckland Council's corporate membership in the Property Council New Zealand be terminated, full stop, without giving a formal reason and without formally citing the unitary plan, would that lessen any potential legal interpretation that of councillors' predetermination or bias on the Property Council's position on the unitary plan?
No, it will not. It doesn't remove the issue at all. It's simply by virtue of the political arm effectively making decisions on corporate memberships. You could substitute Property Council, any other entity. It's simply by the mere fact of a political decision about corporate memberships places each member around this table in the position of risking a later allegation of predetermination or bias in relation to matters relating to that entity.
Right.
So it's a general, general governance approach. It would be a matter for the chief executive to exactly immunise the people that are in a governance role from any such concern.
Very good.
Mr Chair, I suppose I put it, as Mr Councillor Lee put it, that if we withdraw our membership and it gives us a predetermination of our position of the company, it's of the organisation, of the Property Council, it's no different than if we decide today to maintain our membership, is it? Is it not?
I think there is a distinction between the motion not succeeding and not. I don't think that can be taken as a positive statement that elected members have decided to remain. It's simply that the motion hasn't passed.
Can't have it both ways.
Well, hang on. Yeah, listen, you've got, so it's not a simple question, all right? And so the subtlety here is that this is the decision of the chief executive. Once we start putting ourselves in there, then we are making the decision. Now, I'm clearly not going to support that. All right? So, this is the law that we're dealing with here. And so you've got to get your heads around some of the subtleties. And so I think that it's really important to listen to what Catherine's saying and just recognise that what we've been asked to do isn't black and white. It'd be bloody nice if it was, but it's not. And so, you got anything further to add, Catherine? Because then I want to get into the debate.
Through the chair, just to add that there is the possibility, depending on where the meeting goes in its decision making today, to add some clarification to the recommendation that, for example, that a decision not to agree to the motion is not to be taken as an interpretation of this political body's views in relation to the Property Council. So there's some reasons that could be stated in an amended format that could reduce any subsequent risk of a misunderstanding of what the effect of the vote was.
Okay, now I've got Councillor Kathy and then I've got
it's a question for the Chief Executive again. I was advised yesterday that Water Care Services Limited is not a member and has never been a member. Could you tell the councillors why?
I have no idea, Your Worship.
Can you confirm that then?
But he has no idea.
I don't know.
They're not.
It's not on the list.
Right.
They're not on the list, no, but they never have been a member for very good reasons. I'd like the reasons to be told to the councillors, surely.
I don't know, Your Worship.
Okay.
Well, it's in the document here that they're not.
Yeah, well, perhaps I can explain. Right, councillor Lynn?
Sorry, just, thank you, through you, Mr Chair. So just going back to your opinion then, Ms Anderson, so what I got from that, and if you can just confirm, so what you're saying is if this is lost, it's actually just reverting to status quo rather than a confirmation?
Yeah.
Yes, if the governing
Which is a
body
distinction.
doesn't pass the motion, obviously it may be helpful at that point to clarify the reasons, and one such reason may be that because the governing body has decided it is better to leave this issue with the chief executive. But if you revert to the status quo, the present status quo is that the chief executive is determining this kind of membership, and our advice is that that is a very legally secure position for the councillors.
So that's what I'm just wanting to clarify, that we're not confirming membership, we're actually just, if this is lost, it reverts to status quo. Thank you.
That's exactly it. Right, now I got councillor Ross again.
So given what Catherine answered, the answer she gave me before to my last question, therefore we need to have a rider. We need to almost have a replacement resolution. If this is lost, we need to have a second resolution that has got a rider so that we're not indicating bias by supporting the Property Council's position. Is that correct?
No.
It's not absolutely necessary, but I would recommend it, yes.
Thank you.
Right, okay. So, depending on the outcome of this discussion, we may need to have, on the basis of that advice, something that sits in the background that completely covers the position. So, I think that the minds need to come together on that one, so that we can, in the event that this notice of motion does not succeed, that there's something in the background that will give us absolute surety. Well, just listen. So we don't want people being confused at this point. What would you suggest?
It may be helpful to state that the reason for the motion not succeeding, for example, would be that an acceptance of the advice that corporate membership of the Property Council New Zealand does not raise a conflict of interest issue for elected members around this table, and to also emphasise that it accords with proper management of conflicts of interest being enhanced if the council's corporate membership of any external organisation is managed via the chief executive.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's all right.
All right. Well, something like that
That chief executive
would be helpful, depending on the outcome of how we go. All right. So, Councillor Kathy, good on you.
It's Anna. In your advice, Anna, you say that, I'm looking at paragraph 4.4a, and it's about expecting the chief executive would permit the council and its officers not belong to organisations with specific private goals to oppose or advance particular projects, council projects. So to oppose. The manifesto of the Property Council, which is in the notice of motion, it's quite clear that the objectives of the Property Council relative to, for example, the Resource Management Act are in opposition to Council's opinion. So where does that kick in? And what status does a manifesto have when you say that we can support the broad goals? A manifesto is a plan to achieve the broad goals. And that manifesto contains items, and I suggest that all councillors have a look at it, that we are completely opposed to.
Thank you, through you, Mr Chair. The purpose of that paragraph of our advice was to allude to the fact that when an organisation like the council belongs to another organisation, it is possible to imply from that that there is some level of support for the purpose of the external organisation. It isn't possible to imply from mere membership that you support the individual submissions of that external organisation. So first of all, we were making that distinction. We then went on to suggest that one would expect a chief executive of any council to be careful not to have the council belong to organisations which had very specific targeted purposes. So, for example, if you had an external organisation whose purpose was to oppose Plan Change 50, for example, you would think that the chief executive of the council would not allow the council to join that external organisation because its purpose is so specific and targeted to a particular council action. When we looked at the broader purposes of the Property Council and set out some of those on, I think, the following page of our advice on page 6.
Did you look at the manifesto?
I'm not quite sure, through you, Mr Mayor, which portion of this manifesto the councillor is referring to.
Their views on the Resource Management Act being one, but there's quite a number.
What I can say on that is that I'm not familiar with exactly what these views are, but what we did look at is the broader constitutional purposes the Property Council was stated, which were all general public interest purposes, and we did not think they raised any concerns.
Straight out of the ACT Party manifesto, it's fine, Kathy.
There you go. Excellent. You ought to know that one, Cam. Excellent. Right. Councillor John Watson, you've got a question?
Oh, no, sorry. No,
you're still waiting? Good man. Okay, no, that's good. Okay, so I think we've done that. Right, Councillor Mike.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The motive for this notice of motion is to protect the interests and the reputation of the council. It's not meant to be divisive or to cause rancour, and I have to say at the outset I disassociate myself from the comments made by a certain member of the public earlier in the meeting, which I don't think were helpful to the cause of the success of this notice of motion in any way. The notice of motion, from the soundings I've taken, and I haven't really lobbied members, is that it has support from right across the political spectrum. And I think that political support reflects community attitudes. It has every appearance of a significant conflict of interest when the largest local authority in the council, with statutory responsibilities under the Resource Management Act and, of course, the Local Government Act and other statutes, is a member of the #1 property developers lobby group. I want to say that I have worked in my role in local government with the Property Council for many years. I have no bias against the Property Council itself. I haven't always agreed with statements emanating from its spokespeople, but it goes about its business in a legal way, in a totally appropriate way to further the interests of the property developers in New Zealand, vis-a-vis the regulator, vis-a-vis the government, vis-a-vis regional and district council, and now the super city. No problem with that at all. My problem is when the regulator joins up with the lobbyists for reasons that haven't been really convincing. Do we really need the Property Council to lobby ourselves? I don't think so. Or do we need the Property Council to lobby our colleagues in central government? No, we do not. one of the benefits cited by management is that there's better opportunities for communication and networking, and I don't want to go pursue this too much, it's part of politics, but one wonders whether part of this communications and networking, whether the op-ed attacking councillors, anticipating which way they would vote before they voted, was run by management. I don't know. One wonders. In terms of...
Sorry, stop please.
No?
Councillor Mike.
I'm allowed to wonder that, aren't I?
Well, Councillor Mike, so are you talking about our management? Are you talking about council's management?
Yes, he is.
No. Were you referring to council's management there?
Whether the op-ed by the Property Council was run by the management of its biggest member. That's what I was wondering.
Are you talking about us?
Yes, not you. I'm talking about management here.
Well, no. Look, Mike, no, you can't say that.
I can't wonder that?
No,
okay.
no.
I won't wonder that.
You'll withdraw and carry on in some other direction.
Mayor,
I absolutely think that's a very wise course of action.
I won't even think about that.
That's good, mate.
Let me move on. It's been cited here in the legal advice and before this governing body that the decision to join the Property Council was taken by the Chief Executive. I respectfully disagree. I have an email trail with the former Chief Executive, Mr. Doug Mackay, because when the matter was brought to my attention, I raised it with him, and he was genuinely surprised. And apparently the decision was taken by Tier 3 managers of this council and by CCOs, not by the Chief Executive at all. So let's have the facts on the table, and you may want to check that, the veracity of that. That's my understanding, and that's what the email correspondence indicated. The question of membership fees is a secondary consideration, but we are about to deal with the annual plan, and I'm sure members will be voting along the lines of wanting to make savings, but or perhaps they won't even vote for the annual plan at all. However, leaving that aside, we've heard today that the membership is $37,500 for the whole group, excluding Watercare, which for its own good reasons has chosen not to join the Property Council. $37,500, but the Chief Executive said that the training courses, which are normally part of the membership for other organisations, are extra or separate. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, you did, through your worship, and that would be quite standard procedure if you think about the council accessing employer and manufacturer course training.
No, I'm just talking about the Property Council. Normally in the Property Council, those benefits are included in the membership, which is around about $15,000 for the big players. So we're paying a lot more than that, and we're not getting the full cost of our membership, because on one hand, you're told that for $37,500 you get all sorts of networking opportunities and communications and training and all the rest of it, but it seems that the training for us is an add-on, and it would be good to get some transparency around that. I'm intrigued about the training, if I can be, Mr. Mayor. Who goes to the training courses? What officers go to the training courses? What are they trained on? And whereabouts are these training courses taking place? That would be useful to know. I want to come back to the all-important issue of conflict of interest, because, and I suppose it's not new, but I'm not entirely impressed by the legal advice. I am more impressed by the paper put out by the Auditor General, Managing Conflicts of Interest, Guidance for Public Entities. And it makes a number of points. I'm not going to be long about this, but I think we need to hear them. The public entity needs to consider whether there is a reasonable risk that the situation could undermine public trust and confidence in the member or official or the public entity. A lot of our legal advice seems to focus on members, not the official or the public entity. I'm concerned about the public entity. Public perceptions are important. It is not enough that public sector members or officials are honest and fair. They should also be clearly seen to be so, and so should the public entity. And another point, it relates to the public. Where activities are paid for by public funds or are carried out in the public interest, members of Parliament, the media, and the public will have high expectations. They expect people who work in the public sector to act impartially without any possibility that they could be influenced by favouritism or improper personal motives, or that public resources could be misused for private benefit. And just one more point. And what I pick up from the tenor of the legal advice is there's no conflict of interest. And the very fact that the legal advisor company is a member of the Property Council, that's not a conflict of interest either. But conversely, the best advice we have on managing conflicts of interest are simply to declare it and say, yes, there is a conflict. And then there are a number of logical steps to proceed after that. I just want to go back to the Auditor General again, who reminds us that there are no universal rules, but each public entity's own circumstances are likely to be different and likely to generate different problems. Greater strictness might be appropriate for certain types of entity or function. And then I'll just say, managing of conflicts of interest is a fundamental part of good public sector administration, and you don't manage conflicts of interest by denying there's no conflict of interest at all. It would be better to admit there is a conflict of interest, at least an appearance of a conflict of interest, and in this situation, appearances are everything. Regardless, as the Auditor General reminds us, of any relevant legal rules, ethical considerations should always be taken into account when seeking to identify and manage a conflict of interest in the public sector. And what are those ethical considerations, those ethical expectations? Public business ought to be conducted with a spirit of integrity, honesty, transparency, openness, independence, good faith, and service to the public. Mr. Mayor, the notice of motion is to remove a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict of interest in our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand. What we need to ask ourselves is, does this pass the pub test? Does this pass the RSA test? Does this stack up to ordinary members of the public, especially those members of the public who are currently struggling before the Unitary Plan Independent Panel, up against high-paid lawyers, which the public themselves are actually paying for or contributing to? And I refer to the Property Council and our membership, which I understand is the biggest fee-paying membership. I want to see the situation where our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand is reset to one of respect, of professional respect and professional distance. That is the appropriate role for us as an honest broker regulator. The public currently, as we saw at the extraordinary meeting that was held in February, are deeply concerned about what is going on in Auckland. They're deeply concerned about how the council is working. They're deeply concerned, or have been deeply concerned about changes being put forward to the unitary plan without notification. The meeting we had, the extraordinary meeting, was all about process, was all about fair play and civil rights and the rule of law, for equality of the law for all Aucklanders. And I think what we want to avoid is getting to a situation where the interlocking relationships between the regulator, the council and the property council and other lobby groups are managed, that we don't get into a situation as we've seen in America, where virtually the whole country is up in arms about the power of lobbyists and the cosy relationship between lobbyists and legislators and regulators in Washington. We want to avoid that situation, and here is an opportunity for us to put this right and to reset our relationship with the Property Council of New Zealand, not as a member, not as one of the team, but apart, respectful and distant as a regulator, a statutory regulator on behalf of the whole community. Thank you.
Councillor Mike? I see it quite simply. The simple issue underlying this is the relationship between us and our CEO. And this CEO in particular, who we elected as our CEO unanimously together. And there were very, very clear discussions about where we would draw the line between what the CEO is doing and what we're doing. And the line is drawn here, my view. We have delegated him this responsibility to look after us and to manage this in an appropriate way. And nothing I've heard here today changes that. I have heard various views about the fact that this body has personally attacked me or has attacked us. I see no difference between this body and every other body around here that attacks us.
Every day, mate.
And quite frankly, if you're going to choose this, why not choose a whole bunch of other organisations that we're a part of, who have also been submitters to the unitary plan? Councillors, I ask you. So you know the reason why we handed over this responsibility to the Chief Executive Officer? To stop these types of debates and to keep us safe. And that is what the lawyers are saying more than anything. Yep. This is not the way Auckland used to be, where the politicians will step all over the operational side and the operational side sometimes step into the political side.
Sounds like the ARC.
This is not that Auckland. We have actually drawn some quite clear delegations. And we've put, in this instance, our appropriate trust in the person of the CEO to manage that relationship. And his advice to us, which we all agreed is what he should do, is there's no conflict. Now then you can go to a broader, the court of public opinion, and say, well, the CEO's got no role in that, it's just about perceptions. So the court of a public opinion was here today, Lisa Prager and Penny Bright, and they gave it to us, which we've heard for the last 5 or 6 years. And the message has been unrelenting, corrupt, fraud, the whole thing, about this structure and about corporate Auckland. So, are we going to follow that? Or are we actually going to follow what I have been driving for the last 6 years, and that is reliable, consistent decision-making? And being consistent to what we have decided to do here, and that is leave this body of work to our Chief Executive Officer. Because if we start here, we'll just keep going right through the whole lot. And then where does that put us? We get every membership back in here and debate every single bit of it. And that is not what we agreed. We are total about face and a complete abrogation of everything that we've agreed for the last 5.5 years, quite frankly. So it's just not what's at stake here. It's just not about the issue that Mike and Councillor Cathy have been driving, perceived conflicts or otherwise, is actually how we have set ourselves up and whether or not we trust our judgment in that space and trust the judgment of our Chief Executive Officer. And one, I am totally supportive of why we set this up and for all the reasons that the lawyers have pointed out. But we need to be reminded of, and for listening to the advice that we've got from our Chief Executive Officer on this matter. And so do I feel that I've got a conflict with this particular organisation? Probably. Half the time I have a conflict with what they say about me or my leadership or how we're going as a council. It's no different from any other, quite frankly. And is this unitary plan only about development? It's about a whole range of other things within the concept of development. And so we have 250 organisations that we are partners with and that we have memberships of. But in amongst that, probably half of them have submitted one way or another into the Auckland plan, into the unitary plan, on a whole range of things. Historical issues, architectural issues, transportation issues, a whole range of issues, aside from the specific issue of development. So the bottom line advice was, and Stephen was absolutely right in getting appropriate advice because we're going into an important decision-making process. The bottom line advice is we're safe where we are. And it's best to leave these decisions, which we decided 6 years ago and reaffirmed 3 years ago, it's best to leave these decisions relating to these types of bodies usefully with the Chief Executive Officer, because once we start getting involved, we start getting ourselves in trouble. And we start opening ourselves up for real accusations of bias and predetermination. So, councillors, my advice to you and my leadership on this matter is that I certainly respect the fact that this was brought to the table exactly the same way as I respect it was brought to the table 3 years ago. It was a timely discussion, but we cannot now just do an about-face on what we've decided in terms of our delegations with the Chief Executive Officer and do it on spurious grounds, to say the least. There's no substance here at all, as against anything else, for us to be declaring a conflict and to take the duly delegated authority we've given to the CEO back on this ground or any other ground. We've got to stay the path here and be consistent and reliable in our decision making and how we've set this up. There's no reason that I've heard today or in the recent months that would give me any pause for a reconsideration of where we're at as a council, where I'm at as the mayor, and where we're going in terms of this process. We need to stay the course and keep firm and clear. Right, Councillor Cathy.
I'll start with the legal advice, which I've read really carefully, and I keep coming back to a sentence on our page 5, which is the 4.4a. And the legal advice of Meredith Connell is that, as such, we would expect that the Chief Executive would permit the Council and its officers to belong to organisations with broad public interest goals. Broad public interest goals, not antithetical to the Council, and not to organisations with specific private goals to oppose or advance particular Council projects. Broad public interest goals. If you go onto the Property Council's website, the Property Council is the voice of commercial property in New Zealand. They have a manifesto. It's very clear on every page on their website that says they want RMA reform, which we would not support, and it's looking for local government reform. The thing that you haven't addressed, so I think I've got actually a legal basis for supporting this that you've given us, but also the thing you haven't addressed, and neither has the Mayor, is that I'm very clear about the Auditor General's guidelines. Perception of bias or perception of conflict of interest is the same as conflict of interest. And there is a perception out there that we are far too aligned with the development community. And if we can somehow redress that balance, and you're saying to us, no, you can't because, you know, you're not going to get to vote in August. Well, actually, I'm really intent on doing that. I want to exert some authority over what this council can and cannot do. And forgive me if that's a slight on the Chief Executive, it shouldn't be taken as such. So I want to take some control back. And this would be one. Now, the question is, why has Water Care Services Limited never been a member? They don't ever have to face this because they are pure, and that's the way this council should be. Because the goals are not aligned, and that's what the advice is you've given us. The Property Council is for the commercial property voice of New Zealand. We're a council. The ratepayers pay our salaries. So our main concern is the voice of the people and the little communities across Auckland. And do you see them being aligned? I'm looking at you, but I'm not asking for an answer. Is there any alignment there?
Mr Mayor, point of order. I don't know who Councillor Casey's debating with, but she seems to be speaking in that
I'm kind
direction.
of looking there just because it was your advice. I don't mean you. They know that, George. That's not a point of order.
The officers that are speaking to, surely.
Okay, Councillor Cathy, away you go.
You put
Just,
me right
just
off. That's what
sounds
happened.
Councillor George. She's generally debating, but I think she's asking rhetorical questions that may never get answered.
That's right. I'm not asking. I'm just putting them up.
So
for
it's
me,
just, yeah.
I'm talking to you now, George.
Yeah.
For me, it doesn't work. The advice that Meredith Connell's given is that we shouldn't be in the Property Council because the goals are not aligned, and there is a public perception of bias. And that's what this is addressing. So it's take back control and say, actually, we should take the Water Care Services line and stay well away. And that's, you know, if this fails, it's going to the Auditor General. Because I don't think it's appropriate. So.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Cathy. Councillor John Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I agree entirely with you. I think this is a very simple and straightforward matter, and it's really informed, I think, by this conflicts of interest publication put out by the Auditor General, in which Meredith Connell actually referred to in their legal advice. They quote from that, and I think that's got everything that we need to consider in this decision. The Meredith Connell advice, quite understandably, repeats numbers of times that that their advice is in a legal sense, does not in law, it underlines legal, it's at great pains to point out our lack of compromising ourselves legally in terms of the advice that's been put forward. But I would suggest that that's rather selective. If you read Part 5 of the Auditor General's section on non-pecuniary conflicts of interest, which is what we're essentially dealing with here, and there's some very key words. This is different from what Councillor Lee quoted, and this is directed to us. This whole publication is directed to members. That's you and me. And it says, and it's just a couple of very key points here, in terms of bias, the question is not limited to actual bias, but relates to the appearance or possibility of bias. So that's point number one. It doesn't have to be real bias, it just has to be the appearance. Believing yourself to be not biased is irrelevant. That's irrelevant. Here's a key phrase. The need for public confidence in the process is paramount. I'll say that again. The need for public confidence in the process is paramount. Paramount being the key word there. Perception can be an important factor, and another important statement, each case must be decided on its own circumstances. And I would say this case is a distinct one, is a unique one. I have no idea what the Property Council's submissions have been to the unitary plan. I wouldn't have a clue. and nor do I have any intention to go and see them. So I can't, anyone can be accused at any time of conflict of interest. We've been told that numbers of times throughout the year. We seem to be getting told it a lot more often in the build-up to the unitary plan. So people can accuse you. The onus is on them to prove a conflict of interest. I don't know what their submissions are. I can't therefore be accused of having some bias against them through the unitary plan process. But what I can be accused of is not fulfilling my obligations under the outline of the Auditor General, which goes beyond that purely legalistic interpretation that was drummed into, throughout the legal advice we got from Meredith Connell. I'm going, and I suggest most people here should consider, is public confidence in the process, and Councillor Lee referred to the pub test, the RSA test, or whatever, any other test. Well, of course, if you're a membership of any organisation, any group, you know, particularly one you're paying nearly $40,000 to, and you're considering their applications, and that's the other point that's made here, the points where a situation, a risk of the sorts of decisions requiring a formal statutory process and hearing. That's what the unitary plan is doing. So this is the very case that people should be taking a very careful consideration of public confidence and appearance. And that's not what's covered off in our legal advice. It goes in a very, very narrow legalistic view. So in the pub test, or the test of public confidence, public opinion, it is very simple, Mr. Mayor, as you said. I believe that to be a perception or appearance of bias. Simple. I'm going by the advice the Auditor General has given me as a member, and I'll be voting for the motion accordingly.
Right, Councillor Dick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy that this hasn't turned out to be a vilification of the Property Council, because I think the Property Council is a very, very good organisation which does a lot of good work. There's no question about that. And I personally have a very good relationship with a number of members of the Property Council, and including the Chief Executive, Connell Townsend, a very fine person. But do I believe that the Council should be a member of this organisation? No, I don't. And the reason for that is we could simply get all the rights and that we could do a lot of things without being members. And I believe that that's the road that Watercare Services Limited have taken. They are not a member of the Property Council, but they have very close relationships with them, and we can get reports done, we can get research done, and pay for that on an individual basis if we need it, as work needs to be done. So I just wonder whether the Chief Executive or third-tier management who made a decision, whoever it was, made a decision that we should join the Property Council, may have actually looked a little further out and recognised that this was the term in which the unitary plan decisions would be made, and perhaps thought that it may be a good idea actually not to be a member of the Property Council. And you know what, if we don't, I know that if we don't become a member, we may not get to play at their golf tournament, but I think that's something that we probably could do without anyway. Look, I'm glad that we've been given this list of the 250 odd organisations that we belong to, including the UK Institute of Archaeology and the Early Childhood Council and a whole bunch of others. And all due respect, Mr. Mayor, 99% of those groups, the 250, will not be lobby groups and will not be lobbying us. And if you don't believe that the Property Council is not a lobby group, I would invite you to look at the op-ed piece that was written on the 15th of February, just before we voted on the out-of-scope zoning, by the president of the Auckland branch of the Property Council. Lobbying comes in many forms. It doesn't come just as a phone call or as a cup of coffee with somebody or whatever. It can take the form of an op-ed, very critical in the of councillors. And I don't, not unlike my colleague Councillor Walker, I have no problems with somebody being highly critical of this council or me as a councillor, as a decision maker. So I don't have any problems with that, but recognise it for what it was. It was certainly an attempt to influence members of this council, so it was a lobby. And like Councillor Lee, I did wonder if it could have been written by our own comms department, but I'm stopped wondering that when you told Councillor Lee to stop wondering. So I'm no longer wondering about that either. But I do wonder, in fact, if it is appropriate for a regulatory body to be a financial member of an organisation which engages heavily in lobbying of this council. And so this is not a criticism of the Property Council, but it is a criticism of our membership of that body, and we could certainly get all the advantages of being a member without being a member.
Right, councillors, look, we've had three speakers for...
Motion be put.
You want to put?
Yep, I move the motion be put.
Okay, we've got to move that the motion be
By
put.
division?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to have the right of reply, which is normal.
You will actually get the right of reply on the basis that we put the motion, all right? So the motion, to put the motion has been put and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Okay, it's carried on. The voices. Mike?
Mr Mayor, this is very much like the notice of motion proposed by Councillor Quacks and Councillor Fletcher at our February extraordinary meeting. It is about fairness and due process and a level playing field. I have to say that I am disappointed in the legal advice we've had today, if I may say so. Not so much with the content, so I didn't agree with all of it, but simply given the sensitive nature of what the legal advice was about, that Meredith Connell did not make a declaration at the outset saying, we are members of the Property Council of New Zealand. Our advice must be taken into account with that fact known. Unfortunately, it chose not to make that declaration and to go on and say there is no conflict of interest. I have to go back, as Councillor Watson has gone back, to the Auditor General. There's a number of reports, but the first way to manage a conflict of interest is to be upfront about it and admit when there are conflicts of interest or perceptions of conflicts of interest, which in the eyes of the Auditor General are very much the same thing. You know, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it probably is a duck. And the same goes with conflicts of interest. Mr Mayor, what we are asking for here is the support of the members of this governing body to send a message to everyone out there in Auckland that we support a level playing field. We don't support a murky world of interlocking relationships which are not readily admitted. We are not supporting incestuous relationships between regulator and lobbyists. the sort of relationship that is really incensed the people of the United States right now, and they're voting for people that would never have been voted for years ago because people are so angry about it. It would be good to avoid going down that road here, and so my request is to support the notice of motion and vote for a fair go for Aucklanders and a level playing field when it comes to planning and planning decisions.
Okay, right, now councillors, I'm going to move this by way of division, and we need to be aware that we have got behind this motion an opportunity also, in the event that it doesn't pass, that we can actually have a backup that reiterates the reasons why we might not have passed it, right? So we just need to make sure we've got that in behind us. Right, so away you go.
By division, you're voting on the notice of motion on the screen. Your Worship.
Against.
Councillor and I.
No.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Clow.
No.
Councillor Cooper.
No.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Philippina.
Against.
Councillor Hulse.
Against.
Councillor Crum.
Against.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Penrose.
No.
Councillor Quacks.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Webster.
No.
Councillor Wood.
No.
Lost 713.
Right, thank you councillors, and to the movers of the motion, thank you for the opportunity of debating that. Now we've got the alternate that we can move to give assurance of our position. Councillors, we will go from here into confidential. I need your guidance as to whether or not you want to break now, or whether you think we can actually deal with that confidential matter. Okay, thank you for that guidance.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Yeah.
Just before we do though, I wonder if we could have a quick explanation from officials about why this matter is in confidential.
Yeah, sure. We just get the covering recommendation up though first, Councillor Quacks. Right, okay. Right, councillors, you've got it on the screens there.
Oh, I see, because...
Okay, so this is to give us assurance around the reasons why we've made this decision today.
Point of order, just a clarification.
Point of clarification.
Look, we're members of what, 250 different organisations. So so the proper management of conflicts of interest is enhanced if the council's corporate membership of external organisation remains with the 250 organisations.
The chief executive.
That doesn't make sense. So which I think we need to be a bit more clear on exactly what external organisations that covers. For example, the UK Institute of Archaeology. I'm sure that the chief executive doesn't want to have oversight on that.
Climate Change Hysterical Society, EMA.
Councillor Quacks, it's only about corporate management,
with
so it's
EMA
the
people.
250 that we're now with, and so I think it's relatively clear. I mean, we could spend a lot of time debating the wording around this, but I think we've got a pretty general and good idea as to what we want to achieve with it.
Well, I think we need to be quite clear. I think we should. It does not include those individual
No.
memberships.
No.
Oh, that.
It's in the
Presumably,
plural.
the CE would have some oversight on those, because individual member of this organisation could not presumably use this council's resources to just sign up for any old organisation? Or they can?
No, they can't.
Councillors, look, moved and seconded. I'll move it. Second, Councillor Penny W. Right, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No. Record my vote against.
Mine
It's
too.
nonsense.
I'll most certainly do that.
Can you add a rider? It's not true, brackets?
Oh, I thought we were doing honesty and integrity.
Yeah,
and
okay, enough.
Ethicality. Ha-ha.
That'll do it.
Yeah, look,
Right, councillors, now, Councillor Quicks has asked a question,
$20,000
re
a
the matter that we are looking to go into confidential on, as to why, the reasons why, perhaps.
Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
It's simply that this is a treaty settlement matter, and until the deed of settlement is signed, this is common practice.
Yep.
So
Right, so it's subject to discussion between
common
Crown
practice.
and iwi.
Yep.
Okay, on that basis, I'll move it. Seconder, please. Councillor Alf. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, pass. Thank you. Right, just a couple of minutes to allow our media. Thank you, Marie.